All right, folks, it's time for another edition of Mullins Music and Memories right here on the International Broadcast Media. Glad that Nick Palveda and Kim Calhoun and their team of folks have put together this very powerful network that is always having great programs and great conversations. Glad that they've got me as part of it, and we're always glad to be involved and putting together some amazing conversations with some amazing people. And today I've got two more great guests. As a matter of fact, earlier on this platform on the radio show, we had definitely Julie Scott, a leadership lady, on, and she was talking about being a people pleaser and all of that. And I had the pleasure of meeting her through Potted, and definitely have met these two folks as well through that platform as well. So definitely great connecting with people that are positive and doing some amazing things and all of that. So the first person I'm gonna bring on, and then we'll have a conversation with both of them, and who knows, we might have some other guests to join us. But right now we'll bring on Sandy Rodriguez. I know a lot of folks are having a lot of things going on in their world. A lot of people are paying attention to what's happening with the whole pandemic, and of course the stimulus package and a number of other things that are going on in the world. So the first thing I always ask everybody is, how are you doing, Sandy? How is life treating you?
Well, I'm doing great, Mark, and it's very nice of you to have me on your show. And actually, I think life is treating me, to be honest, extremely well. For instance, I know that a lot of us have been suffering from pandemic fatigue, and I mean that's very understandable.
Right.
However, I'm fortunate enough to have an on-site full-time job, which is very unique in this day and age. And well, I mean, I really cannot complain. It's been difficult not seeing many people, personally, but at least I have had the opportunity to lead a relatively normal life over these past few months, which I know is a privilege that not everybody has had.
Yeah, definitely. You're very fortunate in that sense. I know that I've been working from home over the last several weeks and everything because actually one of the companies I work for is a test grading company, and they had not had a lot of work for us over the recent times and everything because a lot of the kids were of course doing their schooling from home, and of course there wasn't a lot of testing going on last year. So I remember back in, I think it was March or April, we got a notice that we were done for that year, and we weren't sure what was going to be going on. But then the latter part of this year, latter part of last year, the beginning of this year, we started doing some COVID kits and just putting those together as part of our job. And now we're back to doing testing. We've been doing that now for about a month and everything. So they did get some testing in, and we're grading those tests like we usually do over there at Measurement. So we are seeing some things that are getting back to normal and all of that. So glad that you're doing well in your work. Tell folks a little bit about yourself and all the things that you've got involved in. Like I said, I met you through Potted, but I would love to have folks learn more about what you're all about.
Thank you so much, Mark. Well, let me tell you, I feel like I've lived a couple of different lifetimes already. I used to live in Mexico City, and when I was living there, I was a managing editor for one of the most influential newspapers in Latin America, which was, to be honest, fascinating. I loved it. However, as you can probably appreciate, it is an all-consuming profession in many ways. Not only would it be normal to work a 14-hour, 15-hour, 16-hour day or beyond, but keeping up with the news cycle really is a 24-hour job. So you're never off the clock, to put it that way. And although I was very passionate about that, and I still am, after many years in that line of work, I underwent a number of personal challenges, including the deaths of my father and my younger brother, and a number of other situations that made me rethink my situation and made me decide to move to Los Angeles and start a new career from scratch. Now, the reason I chose Los Angeles specifically instead of somewhere else was twofold. On the one hand, I knew I wanted to move to a city because I am a city person. I've always lived in cities. I've lived in Philadelphia. I've lived in Puerto Rico. I even briefly lived in Seoul in South Korea. So I think I'm better suited to city life. But also, I wanted a city that was more laid back than Mexico City, and Los Angeles definitely fit the bill because, I mean, it's a stereotype and it isn't. I mean, people are indeed maybe more chill than elsewhere. So in that way, it was a wise choice, I think. However, you can imagine that starting an entirely new career from scratch in a new country, in a new city, at a point in life where most people are seeking stability rather than anything else, it was a challenge. But after searching for something that was in line with my skills and my interests, I became a court interpreter. This is something that hadn't even been on my radar, and it's fascinating. Now, this is a full-time job. It's quite rigorous, very grueling. However, it's an 8 to 5. So after 5, my time is my own, which did not used to happen in the past, which is why I have time now to engage in other things. I also became an artist. I also became an amateur winemaker, and I also wrote a book. So that's what happened.
Wow, you're doing quite a bit and everything. Tell us a little bit about the winemaking, because definitely we have one of our shows here is actually Shoe Crazy Wines, and it's actually a young lady that was involved in, well, she's got her own wine company and everything, and she does her show here on our platform and everything, but she actually started getting into winemaking after she was in an accident. That actually, because she was working in corporate America, and then she got in an accident, and she decided that she had a passion for wine and for shoes. So Gwen has now been doing her company for a several years now, and they're actually in various retail outlets. So I'd love to learn about your story as to how you got involved in the wine industry.
Well, let me tell you, I think that what the story you're describing is very fascinating. That was quite a career transition. In my case, it was more a hobby, and it still is. Here's the thing. I have always been interested in wine in general. In fact, when I was originally hired for my newspaper, my very first position there was being the co-editor of the fashion section and also the co-editor of the food and wine section. So let's say that I was able to learn more than the average person, perhaps, in regard to wine by virtue of that being part of my job. I did go on many wine tasting expeditions, both in Canada, in Mexico, also in the US. Not so much in Europe, though, however logical that would have been, but that was not specifically my case. I do have many friends that went on to become sommeliers. One specifically comes to mind, a wonderful one called Angela Rivas, who is now one of the 25 leading wine experts in Latin America. So that's interesting. But as to winemaking per se, well, I was looking for a hobby, and a former boyfriend of mine and I were very interested in wine tasting, wine more than winemaking. But then at a certain point, I decided that it would be fun to make wine. I invited him along for the ride, and he was kind enough to accept. And originally, we experimented with Merlot, and then we decided to take things a little bit further with a very good Zinfandel that we eventually made. And it was interesting because when people think about winemaking, you might assume you need to own a vineyard, you might assume you need to, make a huge investment, and that is not necessarily the case. In this particular case for the Zinfandel, what I did was I did a little bit of research and found a wonderful uh, winery or rather a vineyard in the Paso Robles region, and ordered 100 pounds of grapes to be brought to me in a facility here in Camarillo, California. That is something most people are not aware of, that you can purchase grapes from existing vineyards. You don't need to own your own, to put it that way. And then you just go through the winemaking process in your own home. In this case, he was kind enough to do the aging aspects in his own home here in California. And it ended up being wonderful. And then, I kept on making other wines on my own and with other friends. Some of them are more traditional. Some of them are very playful. In fact, so playful that I'm not sure I can even call them wines. Like, for instance, recently I've been experimenting with using winemaking techniques, but starting from, let's say, cherry or apple or even cranberry juice rather than grapes. And the results are very playful, of course, but it's a very interesting hobby. I think that people that are interested in wine are a very tight-knit community. And although I cannot say that I am a part of it per se, being an amateur and a hobbyist, every time I'm in any, let's say, picking up grapes or any situation where I come into contact with winemakers, they're the nicest of people. It's a fabulous community. It's a very interesting hobby. And but I did want to mention something, Mark, something that might be interesting to viewers out there that might say, okay, but why not go professional? I
Right.
think at least my experience so far, and maybe your friend, the one you were mentioning, might have more insight onto that. I feel, or at least my experience so far has been that scaling up is very difficult in winemaking.
Right.
For example, if you want to become a baker, it's not that hard. You might say, okay, today I will bake a pie, and tomorrow I'll bake 7 cupcakes, or it's easily scaled. But when it comes to wine, my perception is that you can go from making, let's say, 5 bottles of wine. That would be like entry level using a wine kit. And the next possible step, not only logical step, but possible because of what's out there for you to purchase, is 100 pounds of grapes, which is a way bigger commitment than using, a little wine kit. And I feel that if I wanted to go one step further, because so far 100 pounds of grapes has been, the cap on what I've been able to do. If I wanted to go one step further, I think, Mark, that I would need to spend a lot of money on, say, a license that would allow me to do this commercially. And it would be perhaps more of a commitment than I think I'm ready for right now. But it's a fabulous hobby, I have to say.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You want to make sure that it's something that you can have the time to. And like I said, Gwen is actually having her whole family involved because her daughter is part of the team. And I think that she's got her sons involved as well. So they definitely have a lot of more of a family unit. So it's become like a family business and all of that. You wrote a book called Choose to Prevail. I'd love to hear more about that book as well as your artist background as well. So tell me about Choose to Prevail and what is it that you're prevailing with? Because I think a lot of times we don't do enough of that kind to prevail. Actually, I was talking earlier today on the other show with a life coach, and we were talking about how a lot of times people are oftentimes people pleasers, and a lot of times they're not doing enough to get in touch with their inner self, their inner peace, and things of that nature. And it sounds to me that that's part of what this book is all about. So I'd love to hear more about the book, Choose to Prevail.
Thank you so much, Mark. Actually, if somebody's watching this on video here, I have the book right here. Okay, so this is a book that I wrote to help the reader feel a greater sense of confidence and a greater sense of peace. That was definitely the goal. Now, the other goal that I had in mind is for the reader to not feel like he or she were being talked down to or, like reading something from an all-knowing entity that says, oh, I have all the answers, follow step A, follow step B, because people often do not respond well to that, and they might even feel like they're being scolded. Actually, the inspiration for the book was the fact that because I have lived in different places and worked in different fields, I know a lot of people of all ages, all backgrounds, all walks of life. And the only common thread is that, to me at least, they're all extremely impressive. They're very attractive on many levels. There are people that you would look at them and think, I mean, everything is going great for them. However, many of them confided in me, even before COVID, that they were feeling very stressed out, that they were even having trouble sleeping because, concerns about the future were keeping them up, or that they were feeling that their confidence was lagging. And I thought, well, that's very strange. I mean, if people that are, by all accounts, very successful are having that experience, well, then that is something that definitely should be addressed. Now, I also felt that they were very generous and kind in reaching out to me, and I believe that the reason that they did so was that I personally have overcome a number of very trying circumstances, including the deaths that I have mentioned. I have also been a crime victim, a victim of fraud, a victim of violent crime. I mean, like a lot of things that have been very trying. And I do try to keep let's say, not necessarily a positive outlook, but let's just put it this way. I think that you cannot let whatever has happened define you. I mean, definitely. And I also think that no matter what circumstances look like, you do have more of a sense of control. You have more agency and more control over what's going on than what people normally believe. So I wrote this book with those goals in mind, giving people more confidence and making them feel more at peace. It's a short book because most of my friends and the people I know are extremely busy, and I wanted people to be able to finish reading in, say, an afternoon, and then just keep it handy so that they can reread whatever parts they resonated with the most. And the book basically gives you ideas, most of them quite unexpected, I think, as to how to deal with problems big and small. It can be something big, such as losing a loved one. It can be something small, such as a concern about, I don't know, a physical insecurity that you might have, or maybe difficulty in public speaking, or maybe, I don't know, just being blocked by a former friend on social media, whatever the case may be. And basically, my intention is for people to be able to prevail over whatever it is that is causing grief, no matter what that is. It is very doable, and there are ways to let's say make difficulties less difficult.
No, that makes a lot of sense, and we definitely have to find ways to do that on a regular basis. It looked like you were even using the book to share some of your own personal stories or the stories of other folks that you knew as well. I knew one of the things that you talked about was how even a small apartment was able to be used and able to attract a spouse and everything. That was one of the things that I read that caught my attention and everything, living in a small apartment right now myself and all of that. So I saw that that was one of the things that you talked about. And then also you had mentioned how you yourself had overcome your own fear of public speaking literally overnight. And then something that I know several friends of mine will love your thought about, which is why having haters can actually be flattering. Because I've got some friends in the music business, and they're oftentimes talking about how they sometimes use the haters to fuel their energy and to make them better and all of that. So I'd love to hear some of your thoughts about some of those bullet points within your book.
Absolutely. Well, why don't we work backwards? So you mentioned haters. Okay. Now, nobody says, oh, it's so fantastic to be hated. Oh, that's wonderful. No, of course not. And certainly when I say that haters can be favorable, I'm not referring to violent individuals or people who discriminate or anything around those lines, but just garden variety haters, people that are very critical. They might go online and write very critical reviews or things of that nature. In this case, I think that haters serve a dual purpose. On the one hand, much like your very wise friends have done, a hater can fuel you. There is a saying that is haters equal motivators, and up to a certain point that is true. I mean, if somebody has always said, hey, you can't do this, you can't do that, sooner or later you will prove them wrong. I think we can all think of an example of somebody like in junior high or elementary school or even in high school that was, for example, always picked last for sports or always on, the chubby side or very unathletic. And now just go on social media and you will see that that person is now an Ironman 3 times champion. So, I mean, that does happen. I mean, people that are somehow subjected to others' criticism might eventually choose that to fuel their life in the opposite direction. That's one of the upsides. And the other upside is actually, it's interesting. You know who doesn't have any haters whatsoever, Mark? The only people that have no haters at all are people that are completely uninteresting, uninspiring, that go completely unnoticed. I think that everything, and not even speaking about people, even speaking about other kinds of things. For example, nobody hates dry toast. Nobody says, "Oh, I hate dry toast. It's horrible." Nobody hates a blank piece of cardboard. Nobody says, "Oh, when I see a blank piece of cardboard, that makes me so angry." No, the only things that inspire hate or our reaction are things that are firstly noticeable and secondly intriguing or outside of the norm. And in fact, I would go so far as to say that let's say the amount of love and respect and fascination and obsession that something you do might inspire is proportionate to the amount of dislike that it can inspire. Sometimes you go to, let's say, websites, and you can look, let's say you can go on Amazon or any other book retailer and find any bestseller, a bestseller that a lot of people have said, "Oh, this is fantastic. This book is a life changer. Oh my goodness, I couldn't put it down." Okay, check them out. They have plenty of one-star reviews, two-star reviews, and people
Right.
just hating on them like big time. So it's very interesting. The only way to avoid all bad vibes and hatred is to make yourself very small, to make yourself very forgettable, and well, I think that's no way to live. I mean, you would of course avoid criticism, but you would also miss out on a very rich life, and you don't want that, of course.
Yep.
So, wouldn't
Definitely
you
don't want to do that. And then the other one that I had mentioned and everything was definitely about how you overcame the fear of public speaking and then the tiny apartment concept to relationships.
Absolutely. Okay, so as to speaking in public, here's the thing, and this is something I really go in deep in the book because I know this is a big concern for many people. And I also think that speaking in public is probably one of the most valuable skills a person can develop in every possible aspect. It's important for you as an employee, as a boss, as an entrepreneur, as a parent, as even in, I mean, in all kinds of situations. It's something that you will need to learn how to do. And the more effective you become, the better. Now, here's the thing. Well, I'm going to give you like, there were two things that were going on. Let's say there was one time in my let's say in my college days that I was scheduled to give a presentation. And I really didn't want to do it, Mark. I didn't want to do it because at the time, throughout my childhood and my teenage years, and even up until college, I was massively self-conscious. I was simply unable to do anything like step in front of a class and give a presentation without breaking into a sweat and feeling my heart pounding so hard that I could hear it in my ears, and it was like terrible. I was really probably one of the worst public speakers you could possibly imagine. Now here's the thing. I was scheduled to give a talk in front of my classmates, and I really wasn't looking forward to it. I was terrified. To make matters worse, I also had a lot of homework that evening, the evening prior to the speech. So I was like, oh my goodness. In any case, long story short, I had to pull an all-nighter. I didn't sleep at all. So the following day, I arrived at school on zero sleep. And here's the interesting thing. I think we've all been told that when you need to do something challenging, you need to get a good night's sleep. That's like common wisdom. We all know that that's the thing, but that was not my situation, right? But here's the twist. As it turns out, being totally sleep deprived does not allow you to feel terrified. You're either exhausted or you're terrified. If you're exhausted, you're not terrified because you're exhausted. In fact, think back on a time when you, for whatever reason, maybe you were a new parent, maybe you were in school, maybe there was, for whatever reason, let's say an evening where you didn't sleep at all. The following day, your attitude, if anything, was aggressive or cranky, or if anything, violent, but not terrified. That's definitely something that would not be the case. It's just impossible. So I was able to very, very calmly, and if anything, very assertively step in front of this class and give the presentation. I mean, with no concerns whatsoever. So that was quite interesting because I think I was able to tap into the one upside of sleep deprivation on that particular day. But of course, this is not a long-term strategy that I would recommend for anyone. It wouldn't be healthy at all. Fortunately, over time, as years went by, I came to a realization that made all the difference. No sleep deprivation required, and that is that people are just not paying that much attention to us, Mark. Sometimes
Yeah.
I think there's a correlation between paranoia and narcissism, in that we think, oh, everybody's looking at me and they're criticizing me and they're saying I'm doing this wrong and this and that. The reality of the fact is that people are not even looking at us. They could care less. It's not a thing. They're doing their own thing. And I think your listeners can prove it to themselves. For instance, if at some point you've been to a concert or a sporting event, even if you were very interested in this event, so much so that you bought tickets, you went there, etc., it's not like your eyes and your attention are focused 100% on the quarterback or the lead singer 100% of the time. That's just not the case. At a certain point, your mind wanders a little. You might check your phone. You might speak with your friend. You might go get a snack. So in reality, people are not super focused on everything that we're doing. They're just not. So in fact, that knowledge and that deep understanding allows us to feel far less self-conscious, and in fact knowing that if we want to attract attention, we would actually kind of have to go out of our way to do that. So knowing that people are not out to get us, in fact they don't even care, that takes a huge burden off our shoulders. I think it can be, a blow to the ego, like, what do you mean they're not looking at me? No, they're not. But it's also very, very freeing, and you can also prove it to yourself. I mean, if you think about a person like a friend or a neighbor or somebody that you see several times, somebody that you know and like, okay, or dislike. What was this person wearing the last, I don't know, 3 times you saw them? I can guarantee that you have no idea, no idea. Even if you're a fashion editor, you still have no idea. It's very interesting. People are just not that aware of our every moment.
Definitely. But like I said, you definitely learned a lot and definitely shared a lot in this book. Like I said, I am curious about this tiny apartment concept, and everything is up there in my apartment, which is not exactly the biggest apartment in the world.
Well, let me tell you, this was actually a true story, and it's also in the book. But I'll tell you about it in detail because it's interesting. So when I was living in Mexico City, at a certain point, I bought an apartment that was in line with my budget. I mean, buying any size of an apartment is still very, it's not easy. So I bought this apartment that was tiny, 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 but it was divided into 2 floors, like a lower level and an upper level, but it was really small, really small. Okay. So I never lived in that apartment myself. My intention had always been to rent it out. And well, that was quite unfortunate because if I had lived in it myself, maybe I would have been happily married years ago, because every single tenant that I had got married, I mean, like immediately. And this happened whether they were male or female or gay or straight or young or old or in a relationship or not in a relationship or anti-marriage or looking to get married or a great catch or quite the opposite. I mean, it didn't matter. They all got married. Now, this is really weird. So I mean, obviously, it wasn't like it had magic powers, or it's not like a feng shui, thing. I don't think that there was any, woo-woo factor involved. But my mom and I did sit down to, debrief the situation and see what it was that was causing all of these marriages to happen. And I think we found we have a few theories that I think are accurate. Firstly, the location for this apartment was fantastic. It was fantastic. It was in a place where if you worked in that area, you would most likely rarely need to drive because everything was conveniently located. Restaurants, movie theaters, shopping centers, wine bars, and if you worked there, well, your office. And in fact, everybody that moved there did actually work in the area. So I can say that few of them had to, endure long commutes or the price of gas or, any traffic related stress. Now, I would think that people that are super stressed are not very prone to getting married or finding romance. So, I mean, just removing that stressor, that would be a step in the right direction. Then the other thing is that this apartment, by virtue of being small, was also very inexpensive. So whoever moved there was not spending a huge amount of money. And I can assure you that people that are broke or that are in dire straits financially are not looking for love. They're not going out and dating. They're not, I mean, it's definitely not a thing. There are more pressing concerns. So the fact that rent was low definitely must have taken a load off their shoulders and allowed them to feel, more prone to searching for love. Or even if they were already in a relationship, maybe to have more disposable income for dates. Or if they were not in a relationship, maybe more disposable income for going out to, bars, etc., where they might meet someone. So that was definitely another factor. Then the other thing is that once the tenant actually did start dating someone, firstly, this apartment was not modern by any stretch of the imagination. If anything, it was very homey, it was very cozy. And I think that was something that made conversation or intimacy, and by that I don't necessarily mean sex, more like opening of one another. I think it made that easier than it would have been in a very glamorous, like all steel and glass and sharp edges, which is also very appealing in architecture, but not very, it doesn't really lead to romance most of the time. So that was also interesting. Then the other thing is that, okay, because this place was divided onto two levels, that avoided many potential arguments. Or, well, I mean, right now with COVID, I see a lot of couples living in cramped quarters say that they were like about to, divorce or break up because it's very stressful to be right next to a person 24/7. And my apartment had the advantage of having these two levels available. So any potential for, an excessive amount of proximity was very easily remedied. And also another important thing is that everybody wanted to move in with these people, with my tenants. All of their partners wanted to move in with them at once because they also wanted to save on rent. They also wanted to cut back on commuting. I mean, I don't know, it's just like a number of factors. Of course, there's no magic to this, but that's what happened. And I think that the takeaway is that your surroundings do have a lot to do with your outcomes. My parents back then, they also owned an apartment very different from mine. And every couple that moved into that apartment got divorced very, very soon. And it was a beautiful apartment. It was beautiful. It was very glamorous, ultra modern, very sleek. However, it was very expensive. So again, we know that that's not ideal. Also, the super modern, high gloss surfaces, etc. Again, they're beautiful, but maybe not ideal when you want to bond and build rapport, etc. And the other thing is that it was located right in front of what would be the equivalent of the stock exchange in Mexico City. So it was a very busy, very loud, very bustling area, also an area where picketers and protesters tended to gather. So, I mean, just getting home, I mean, I can assume that whenever the wife or the husband arrived home from work, they would be like already in a horrible mood. And even though the apartment was beautiful by all accounts, I mean, maybe it wasn't ideal for that one particular purpose. And it's also been studied by many that your specific surroundings, decoration, and your home itself can lead to weight gain or weight loss or stress or the opposite. So there really are things that one can take into account and maybe consciously implement if one is searching for a particular outcome, be it marriage or weight loss or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, wanted to bring Brad into the conversation as well. I know he's been waiting patiently and all of that and everything. But before I bring Brad in, the quick question I was going to ask you is, what is one of the things that surprised you about being a court reporter? Because you're also a court reporter, and that's a new job and everything. So as I bring Brad in and we talk about leadership, I'd love to hear some of the things that you found different about that particular field and everything.
Oh, absolutely. So I'm a court interpreter now. And as an interpreter, firstly, I think it's a great career choice for anybody out there that might be fully proficient in more than one language. It is a good career choice. The barrier to entry is great because there are very rigorous certification criteria. But once you're in, it's fascinating. I think, Mark, that it's probably the only job or activity where you actually don't have to wait to see the fruits of your labor. For example, if you're a pastry chef, you bake your pie now and you pull it out of the oven in 2 hours, or if you're a medical researcher, you'll see the fruits of your labor decades from now. But when you're when you're a court interpreter, you do things in the now, and the moment you're done, you're done. There's nothing to take home, nothing to, keep thinking about. It's over. It's very interesting that way.
So, Brad, you've done a lot around international management, and you've also written books about leadership and personal leadership and influences. I was just wondering if you could share a little bit about your background and how you got involved in the whole leadership field, because it sounds to me like both of you, both Sandy and yourself, are part of that whole leadership community that we need to see and hear more of. So I'd love to hear more of your story as well.
Thanks, Mark. It was very interesting to listen to Sandy and her experience and background. I guess I started my kind of leadership journey with the Peace Corps. I was a volunteer out in the Central Pacific in the Marshall Islands, and then became a staff member and ran the program in Micronesia, and then was a associate director in Samoa. So a lot of different kinds of leadership requirements went on there, especially in Micronesia, where we had offices. If you can imagine the United States with an office in the state of Washington, and you had satellite offices in LA and in Florida and in Chicago and in Boston. That's where we had spread out across the Pacific, and each one had different cultures, different languages, so different jobs as well. So that kind of got me started with that. And then coming back to the States after about 10 years living overseas off and on, I worked for Westinghouse, and we did a lot of training and management training and project management with programs in the West Bank and Gaza and the Middle East. So I was very lucky to work in over 30 plus countries, I guess, throughout my career. So I've always had that interest in international leadership and kind of what works and what doesn't, and not so much kind of a textbook approach, but rather a practical approach to it. And then I got involved with teaching a leadership specifically, and for the last 9 years, I've been teaching a leadership class for team leaders and middle managers at one of the NASA organizations at Goddard Space Flight Center. And that was eye-opening as well. Here's NASA, always rated one of the top U.S. agencies to work for, yet they had similar leadership problems as anybody else, and they constantly were working on it. The difference, of course, I think with NASA is leadership there was determined to invest in training for their managers, and many folks don't. In fact, I think the research done for the forward on my last book showed that especially with young folks, millennials, about 50 million in North America, of which about 10 million are in management, 2 million more a year going into management, yet failure rate is like 60% according to their own expectations and that of their organizations. So I always felt that the reason why, a couple reasons why for that. One is people get promoted today often because of their technical expertise. You're the best architect, you must then be the manager of all the other architects without any training in leadership or management or kind of people skills. So I felt there was always a niche there. And the other reason was that oftentimes trainers or new managers don't get training until they've been on the job 7, 8, 9 years. And the habits that you pick up your first couple of years, rightly or wrongly, they stick with you for a long time. So I felt there was a niche there of trying to get to those new managers before they started doing all the wrong things, and to see what I could do to help them. And so I wrote a book called Quick, I Need to Be a Leader in 30 Days, meaning I just got promoted. Oh my gosh, what am I supposed to do? And so I always felt that based on kind of all the training I've done with NASA and other clients, that in a 30-day course, you could help people hit the ground running in terms of leadership, following a simple process of kind of being exposed to kind of basic leadership principles, focusing on your followers, knowing who you're working with, who is trying to follow you, who do you think want to follow you, and then a lot of practice, trying different things out, trying some new behaviors out, and then having some reflection and feedback time, working with a mentor or a coach or a minister or a colleague or your own boss, and following. And I develop a practical approach on what to do and how to do it over about a 30-day period. And I designed it first as a live course, and then thought, now this should be self-directed so that people could take a book like that. And in fact, I have it right here. Quick, I need to be a leader in 30 days, and work at their own speed. Even though I know that most companies today can't take 30 days off to train their people, or would give them the time to do that. So I thought a self-directed approach would be the way to go. So I felt it was good for managers themselves, for coaches, for mentors, for anybody who wants to help new leaders kind of get started on a successful footing.
What do you think is some of the biggest mistakes folks make in the sense of becoming leaders? I know a lot of times folks don't even think that they have the leadership qualities. I know a lot of times, I will even admit that I've been guilty of that, of sometimes not even going for jobs because you don't feel that you have the capability to be a leader and all of that. So what are some of the other mistakes that you find that folks make in the sense of the skill sets that they need to be leaders?
I think they don't know where to look to even begin. They're oftentimes getting books that are just kind of textbook approaches, very theoretical, and doesn't help them. I also think a biggest problem, probably the biggest one I found, is that what they got promoted for was their technical expertise. And so what they end up doing, because they don't know what to do from a management or leadership perspective, they start looking over other people's shoulders, telling them how to do their jobs. We call that micromanaging. And if you've ever been on the receiving end of a micromanager, it's the worst thing that you could ever have. So, but that's all those folks would have to fall back on, is their own technical expertise. And we know from, lots of research with emotional intelligence and many other approaches that over time, technicians, they lose their technical edge because they're just away from it, as they're required to do other administrative, strategic kinds of duties.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that. And one of the other books that you wrote was about, I guess, is using some of those same techniques, I should say, for dealing with teen safety. And I know one of our other shows here talks about teenagers and even how they're dealing with apparently rises in suicide and things of that nature. But I was just wondering if you could tell us a little bit about this book that you wrote that dealt with teen driving fatalities.
It's called Keeping Our Teenagers Safe on the Road Should Be No Accident, if you could get the title. My late colleague, Jim Harden, and I developed a model for temperament called the Basic Elements of Temperament. And temperament's been around for thousands of years, since Hippocrates' time. So I didn't invent it. And there are many, many models out there. If you've heard of MBTI or DISC or Enneagram or True Colors, there's hundreds of them. We applied that to leadership and use it in our course at NASA and many other places. And I still do temperament workshops. But I thought the same issues around temperament impact teen drivers. And so I did it as kind of a booklet to put in the glove compartment of your car for parents to pull out and kind of remind themselves, kind of in a checklist form, of questions to ask their teenage drivers. And it gets at challenging how they view the world. Temperament is, it's our inborn way that we view the world and view the behaviors of others. So if you can imagine, you're influenced by, as we all are, our temperament. When you're behind the wheel, you're observing the driving behaviors of others, and how you react has to do with your temperament somewhat. And so a greater understanding of it, I thought was very important to make people aware, both the drivers and the parents of drivers who are trying to make them as safe as possible.
And it seems like you were also using temperament in one of your articles that you wrote as well, because you were talking about that whole thing. And I know people are familiar with both the bridezilla and the groomzilla, which is that whole concept of the practical use of temperament and how brides, grooms, and their families can survive the wedding without committing murder. Now, I'm a single person and have never been married, but my brother's been married twice and is, I think, heading to the third one. So I've seen some of those environments. Plus, I worked at a cultural center where there were a number of weddings that I was part of, as the sense of being in a venue that was the wedding site. So I've seen a number of those kind of relationships. I was just wondering if you could share a little bit about the use of temperament in those relationship type situations, particularly weddings.
Temperament. There are 4 basic temperaments in our model, and we developed that because they're easy to remember. We use earth, air, fire, and water. All 4 of those are in each of us. They're in a stacked order. If you think of them as dinner plates in a restaurant, your top plate is called your dominant temperament. That's how you kind of view the world the most. That's how you want to be perceived by others. Your second one, your secondary, is akin to it, and it supports it, and it prevents you sometimes from jumping to conclusions with that dominant temperament. It kind of holds you back and makes you think. Your third plate or temperament is tertiary, and we're usually neutral when we see behaviors like that. But the fourth one is our shadow temperament. That's the one that typically gets us in trouble. That's the one that we don't want to be perceived at. It's the one when we see behaviors from that temperament, whichever one that is, earth, air, fire, or water, it could be any of those, we usually have a negative reaction to it. And so when you think about it, any organization, any meeting, any wedding reception will have all 4 of those temperaments at play. And so the earth temperament is the more traditional, if you can picture a stereotype of a traditional, which we don't want to use temperament to stereotype people, but it gives us the idea, is a more traditional, by the book, planning type of person. So you can, sometimes there'd be my grandfather was a very strong earth who there was a right way and a wrong way, and there's black and white and there's no gray in his world. And you can imagine that person at that wedding reception. And then you have the heirs, more intellectual types who really are concerned about competence and how well things are established, but they're not into the people side too much. On television, The Big Bang Theory, this was you take it to extreme, this was the Sheldon Cooper type. Intellectual, brilliant, not good with people too much, That's the extreme example of that. Earth, air, fire, these are the people that like to have a good time. These are your guys that get out first on that dance floor at that wedding reception and grab the bride and put a big smooch on her and dance up a storm. They like to have fun. They like to try different things out. They'll try every kind of liquor at that reception, chances are. And you might imagine when that's going on, what that earth grandfather is thinking about when he sees that God's grandson doing that. Right. And the fourth is water. These are the people persons. And you were talking about an earlier meeting you had, people pleasing personality.
Right.
That's that, and that's in all of us. We have all 4 of these temperaments in all of us. They're the ones who are concerned about everybody's having a good time. They're coming around table hopping, making sure that everybody's got a photo and everybody has their drink and their piece of cake. And, so these are the 4 temperaments that are always at play. And at a wedding, it was easy to write that article because people are kind of at their extreme ends of the extremes in those temperaments. Whereas in an organization dealing with leadership, you have leaders who have followers of all 4. And so if you're a leader who is, an earth, for an example, traditional leader, this is the way I want it done. This is the plan. And you've got fires in in your organization as your follower who doesn't want to do the same thing twice, thinks these rules are just not for everybody. But, if we can do it quicker, isn't that better? You have some conflict. So our whole purpose of doing the basic elements of temperament was as a tool, a self-awareness tool. We say in our course, artists like Sandy has her easel or pen and ink, and an engineer might have a slide rule. What does a leader have? They've got self-awareness. Mm. They need to know themselves and know their followers and know their organizations. And relationship-wise, they know their spouse or significant other. They need to know their family, and they know that not all families have the same kind of temperament that you do. And so oftentimes you'll see conflict in families and relationships, between earths and fires, between waters who try to please everyone and end up pleasing no one, or the water who comes in, the people pleaser who can talk to the other three without a problem because they all get along with him or her. And so those mechanics are going on in life and in our organizations that I think as we grow into management or leadership positions, or as we develop as individuals, our goal in our courses are not to make better earths or make better waters. It's to make whole people and to develop each of those so that you wouldn't know by their behaviors just what is that dominant temperament. We want people to feel comfortable, more comfortable in all four of their temperaments, especially their shadow temperament that they've been typically avoiding most of their life.
Now, one of the things I know that they talk about in leadership is this whole concept of micromanaging and macromanaging your people and things of that nature. Is that something that leaders should be worried about, or is that something that leaders shouldn't be worried about? Because I do sometimes know that sometimes you'll find leaders that are, they kind of like want to take control, and that's one version of one of those terms and everything. And there's others that will let their staff have a little bit more of the reins and all of that. So in terms of leadership, in your standpoint, is that something that leaders need to be concerned about, or is that something that's overblown when we hear conversations about micromanagement and macro management?
My experience has been it's the extreme cases that are the most troublesome. As I said earlier, micromanaging is a problem. And it's the problem for the followers, not so much the manager. It'll end up being a problem for the manager when you have people transferring out of your organization or wanting to leave your team to go to a different place that is a better fit for them. So I think micromanaging and any extreme kind of management approach, is difficult. When Daniel Goleman did his research for emotional intelligence, he went to 180 different places all over Europe and the U.S., different organizations, and found, there are some managers who were very easygoing and let their employees do everything, yet they got rated very low. Others who were more strict got rated high, some got rated low. And he was trying to find some commonalities, and the commonality was really emotional intelligence, and he went on to write tons of books and become very successful about that. Just the idea that as managers and leaders, really, for me, it's as people, we need to be able to recognize emotions in ourselves and recognize when they are influencing our behavior and getting us into trouble sometimes. So, it's a long answer to say, I don't think in itself that micromanagement equals bad, but it does most of the time, I think. I've asked, when I have these workshops, I have groups of earths all together and groups of fires all together, and they talk to each other. Hey, how come you do this? How come you do that? And so we ask the earth, how do you define micromanagement? And they say, there's no such thing. We are just caring about our organization. We care about our people. We care about the work that's being done. And the other three groups all just burst into laughter because they're on the receiving end of it often. So, it's a challenge.
Are there any kind of qualities that you think make up a leader? Because I know sometimes folks will try to define what makes a leader. Like some people would say that, that Barack Obama had leadership qualities, while others may say that that person that currently left 1600 had some of those leadership qualities as well. So, like I said, I might have my own personal opinions, but
Yeah.
what do you think makes a leader, whether it's in, and I'm just using politics as an example, I could just as easily have used sports, because definitely folks
Yeah.
feel that Tom Brady has leadership qualities, and definitely there's some that feel LeBron James has leadership qualities. But I was just wondering, what do you think makes a leader, and what are some of the qualities of a true leader?
I asked that question as kind of the kickoff to my leadership workshops. And first I ask, name a leader from history or now that you think, and you usually get the president, whoever the president is, Republican or Democrat, doesn't really matter. They'll say that's a leader. I usually get Oprah as another one, usually comes out as well. And you'll get a Michael Jordan on the sports side, and you'll get Abe Lincoln, like that. And we'll start to identify, well, what are some of the characteristics? And, listener usually comes up, good communicator. The list just goes on and on and on. If you Google it, there's I think one time I found 200 different adjectives to describe it. And so in my book, I put a lot of different quotes from folks, from a Vince Lombardi, leaders are not born, they're made, to even the former First Lady Rosalind Carter, who says a leader will take people where they want to go, but a great leader will take people where they don't necessarily want to go, but ought to be.
Right.
And so you get a lot of differing points of view on it. I like John Maxwell's approach. Leadership is nothing but influence. Mm. And if you are influencing somebody, you are leading them. That's why I think we view leader. I and my colleagues who do a lot of training in leadership talk about not having to have the position or title of manager or leader in order to lead. You lead from wherever you are in the organization. And that gets into the whole idea about power. And it came up in NASA and comes up everywhere. Everybody wants to have that title. If I was a boss, then I could straighten everything out. But position power is of the three that I like to call the types of power that comes from mentors of my own that I have in the book. Position power is kind of the lowest level of power because followers follow you because they have to, or they'll be fired, or they'll get in trouble, or they'll be fined. These are policemen, these are uniformed folks today. This is the IRS. You can't just not follow what they tell you. Those consequences. Position power. Then there's the next level is power of competence that we take with us. It's based on our experience and our education and our God-given willingness, personal attitude that we have some control over. And people follow you there because of what you've done for them or what you've done for their organization. You've won contracts, or you're on the best team, or you have the best clients. Because of your competence, they want to be with you. But the best one, and the one we shoot for, is the power of a positive reputation.
Oh, yeah.
That's what we want. This is where people follow you because of who you are. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter where you are in the organization. You need help, they are there because of who you are. And that's what we are trying to get to with our leaders and managers today. And oftentimes it takes a while to make that happen. And we live on quarterly to quarterly results oftentimes in today's world of work. It's difficult to do.
But along those same lines, it seems that we're seeing more leaders being accepted as being leaders because of their role in society. I'm thinking about how a lot of times people that we never would have considered being leaders are now getting respect because of their role in what's going on with the pandemic. I'm thinking about how we're giving a lot of respect to our essential workers, at least for now. Now, whether that will carry on after this pandemic is over and we've moved into the next phase, whatever that is, of a hybrid kind of existence or whatever this becomes and everything. But for right now, we are giving more respect to our food delivery people, whereas before they were kind of seen as almost a something that you didn't have to give respect to. And even some of the, I think doctors and would be put up there with lawyers that they usually did have respect and everything. But now some of their cohorts, like the nurses and the technicians and people of that nature, are gaining in respect because of what they're having to do with the pandemic. So do you think that we're seeing kind of a switch in people being accepted as leaders because of what's going on in our world right now?
Sure. Good point. I think it's well overdue for more respect for those folks. I don't know if they looked at everybody like that as leaders. I used to, when I lived in Washington and lived in Bethesda, I would see Dr. Fauci on the metro. You take the metro to work every day, like so many others. And now I would say he's a leader. He's influencing presidents, today and all of us. And so sometimes you're just thrust into leadership roles and you have to do it. And, my son is a sergeant in the police force, and he was up there in Capitol Hill pushing people out during January 6th. And you get a newfound respect for what those folks have to do. And they're leaders in their own right. They had to lead the charge to get back the Capitol. So I think you're right, Mark, that there's I think increased awareness of the need for leadership and people taking up what like Rosalind Carter would say, we don't necessarily want to go that way, but we need to be that way. And so there is a great respect, I think, that's out there today, and I'm all for it.
No, I definitely think it's a great respect. I'm also seeing people having a lot more respect even for like teachers and things of that nature. Now we can just get the teachers to get some better pay and things of that nature. But definitely I think that there are having a lot more respect as more parents are having to do what they've been doing for decades because of the at school movement that kind of came about because of the pandemic as well, with more people having to teach their kids along with the teachers from the home environment. I'm thinking that the teachers are also getting a little bit more respect and also being seen as leaders in our community. And speaking of in our community, and this is actually for both of you, do you feel that we're being taught enough about leadership in our schools, or just about some of the things that are out there that we probably should be taught in our schools? And I don't know that we're being taught as much as we used to be, or even it's taught as much as it is in other countries, because I sometimes think that other countries do a better job of teaching about leadership than we do, even within the school system. So I'll start with you, Brad, but then I'd love to hear from Sandy as well, if we're hearing enough of a conversation in that leadership space and in our school systems.
Well, yes, I mean, no question about it. The pandemic was a wake-up call for all parents who had to become teachers themselves, and how difficult it is. My grandkids are all online all the time, virtually, and it's a challenge. Teachers' unions are in the news again. Do we let teachers go back without shots and then with shots? Here in New Orleans, I live in New Orleans and Louisiana. It's always an issue. They're trying to prioritize teachers before they do that. And I can't blame them for wanting to be more protected. But I think it definitely was a wake-up call for all of us parents and grandparents about the role of teachers today. And I think it's long overdue.
Yeah, definitely. What is your thoughts, Sandy?
Well, I think that leadership as a topic to be taught in schools, I don't know if that's necessarily something I would specifically fight for. Although I have to say, for example, in Mexico, I do remember that there was one subject that was taught in high school, which is called civismo, which might translate loosely into good citizenship. And that was basically what the class was about, which I think is valuable. I think it's valuable and reasonable. Of course, I mean, it's one thing to, know what you should do, and it's quite another thing to go out and do it. But what I do think is that parents and teachers should make an effort to let their children know that Leadership can take many forms. It was very interesting to hear Brad mention that leadership it's not necessarily tied to a specific position or post. And in fact, occasionally it might be a signal of, let's say, not being a very effective leader if the only reason people are doing what you want them to do is because they have to, or there is a consequence if they don't. But what I was thinking about, as you were asking this question, Mark, is this. For example, not everybody is, for example, a type A or a stereotypical leader. And I'm sure that both of you would agree that there are different types of leaders in different types of situations. Many individuals can be massively influential or even iconic in their industry, even if their, let's say, outward appearance is not what one would imagine a leader would look like. I think it's the same thing with confidence. Sometimes when we think about confident people and we try to picture them in our heads, we see the guy with the power tie or the lady with the shoulder pads or the people that are speaking in a cool and calm manner, or somebody that is very loud or brash, or quite the opposite, very calm and collected. We all have our own individual perceptions of what a confident person or what a leader could look like. And it's interesting because I plan to get Brad's books as soon as possible. They sound very, very interesting, and I'm sure I will agree with what he has to say, because I certainly agree with everything that he has said so far. I do think that there are ways to become influential in your field, regardless of your personality type. And in fact, going back to what Mark was also mentioning about people pleasing, what I have experienced is that many people, children, teenagers, and even adults, when faced with new situations, be it a new school, a new job, new group of friends, sometimes we want to fit in with a clique or a group, or let's say what we believe is expected from us. So we tone down a lot of aspects of our personality. We don't want to be considered weird or shocking or polarizing or anything like that. So we play down our idiosyncrasies. And what I've seen as a result is that, yes, you're welcomed into the fold, at least initially, because you're not threatening or I mean, you kind of like sneak your way in because nobody's even paying that much attention. But over the course of time, you cannot really sustain that appearance for too long, because you will appear and feel very stressed out, very strained. You might even look suspicious or even like a phony or like a fake. And then people become mistrustful, and then that's definitely not what you want if you want to become influential. However, when you overcome that desire to fit in or to people please, which is very, very common as children or teenagers, and even when we're a little younger, when you overcome that and you just let your personality show through, no matter what your personality may be, you do become a little polarizing. Maybe some people will respond to you very favorably and maybe some will not. But it's very interesting that you somehow start becoming more influential and people start taking their cues from you. It's very interesting. It's something that I've seen happen.
Yeah, let me just add that I added a section in my book about mass influence, because I think that's what leadership, when people say, well, what can I do? What's the practical side of it? One thing you could do is start to look at your organization in terms of how do you influence it? Who are the influencers in the organization? How do you, I like to look at the organization as a system with, we've got diagrams in there about, administrative, technical, social, strategic, and who are the influencers within each of those? Who are their bosses? Who reports to them? What do they do? What can you offer them? What can you get from them? And you start to be a hub. One of the work of Karen Rao and others in influencing did a lot of good work on that. And I think there are 10. They highlight 10 different areas to work on. Ultimately, to become a hub of influence, that you are the go-to person in your organization. You have knowledge of who's doing what to whom, in a sense, you're become like a fixer, if you will. Maybe you're not doing it yourself, but you know who to go to get things done in the organization. And as you grow and in your influence, you are perceived more as the one very competent person to find out how I can get things done fast. And that's a great role for leaders, even if
Yeah,
you're an introvert.
one of the other things I've noticed about leaders, and I'd love to hear both of your thoughts about this, because Sandy, you actually mentioned it in your bullet points and everything. But it seems to me that leaders are very good in a lot of ways with time management. I know that you, like I said, you had mentioned earlier, Brad, that Sandy is not just doing the court interpretation, but she's also doing the amateur winemaking and is an artist as well. So it seems like she's managing her time, and it definitely seems like a lot of the leaders I know how to manage their time, oftentimes juggling multiple jobs, even within the company or without the company, because sometimes they also may be leaders in their church or in other organizations that they're part of. So I'd love to hear you think about the concept of time management and that's important within leadership. And I guess I'll start with you, Sandy, since you mentioned it as your bullet point, but then I do want to hear Brad talk about time management as well as a trait that leaders need.
Okay, absolutely. I think there's actually a saying that is, if you need something done, give it to a busy person. And that makes perfect sense to me because people like ourselves that are very busy tend to be also very good at time management and making time stretch out in order to fit in all of the activities that we need to fit in. I feel that I was somehow trained to do a lot of activities because I used to work very long hours, Mark. I used to work, as I was mentioning, most of my waking hours. So now, even once I'm done with my full-time job, even though it is quite grueling to many, to me, it's like, wow, it's still super early. So I still have the energy and the drive to do a lot of other different things. I think it's a function of being used to doing a lot of things, also a personality thing. I believe that I thrive on stress and I enjoy being productive. However, I also have like a secret weapon that, well, I mean, it sounds a little bit old school, but it's worked very well for me, which is this. So every year when a year is about to start, I get myself a day planner. In fact, my day planner is right here. It's a little day planner, one page per day of the year. Okay, so what I do is every single activity that I want or need to do, be it work related, personal, social, family, it doesn't matter. It goes in the book. Now, I don't want you to get overwhelmed or horrified, but let me show you an example of day that's already gone. Like these are just 2 days that have gone by. Okay. So you see a lot of stuff on it. Okay. Now the reason I write everything in this one particular book is it has a lot of advantages. A lot of people that I have spoken with tell me that they have a desk calendar, a wall calendar, a calendar on their computer, a calendar on their phone, little sticky notes with information. And the problem with doing that is that it's very easy to lose track of something. So I think it's better to keep all your information in one place. That's one thing that I would strongly recommend. Now, the second thing is that even though it's very, very, very old school, I do find that the act of writing something down makes a difference. It kind of does, at least to me. And the act of crossing off things that I have completed is very satisfying. It's very gratifying and very productive. Also, bear in mind, because I'm including everything in that book, well, it's just a matter of me to flip through my pages and I feel, well, I'm so in demand. I am magically productive. I am the most popular woman in town because, there are just so many things written in my book. So that makes me feel like, it's personally rewarding. And then there's another thing. A lot of people fall into the trap of saving interesting things or fun things for the weekend and only the weekend. So then they lead a very fractured kind of life when it's just all things that to them are uninteresting or dull throughout the week, and maybe a small spurt of fun over the weekend. So I don't want that to happen to me. So I do purposely schedule some sort of appealing activity or activities throughout the week and not only on weekends. Maybe I might say, okay, I'm going to watch this movie or I'm going to speak on the phone with this friend. Because I actually write every little thing in this book. I mean, even if it's like doing the dishes, even if it's like preparing my interpreting equipment for tomorrow, everything is in that little book. So nothing falls through the cracks because everything is there. Now, assuming that, okay, let's say that tonight I'm not entirely done with everything on my list, no problem. I simply cross it off from there and place it elsewhere on the calendar, maybe the following day, maybe the following week, etc. I might make adjustments as I go along, but still nothing falls through the cracks. And I've even found that this method keeps me, well, firstly, it has another two additional benefits that few people might have realized. One is that it can help you save money in this regard. Let's say that today I see a commercial for something that I want to buy, or maybe you guys mentioned something and I think, oh, I would like to buy that, or I don't know, maybe I learn about something that I'm interested in getting, but maybe I can't really afford it comfortably right now. So what I do is I go to my little book and let's say on a day when that might be more affordable for me or more reasonable, what I would do is I would write, buy this thing. And you know what happens? When the day comes around, I rarely want the thing anymore. By then it has lost its appeal. So, right? So you end up saving a lot of money. Yeah. Then the other interesting thing is that it can also be a driver for achieving of goals. Let's say, for example, that I want to get in peak physical shape. I mean, really, there's no motivation unless you yourself create that motivation. So what I might do is I might schedule a bikini photo shoot within a month and I write it down. And then on the previous days, I write down like a countdown, like, okay, I'm 10 days out. Okay, I'm 9 days out. Okay, I'm 8 days out. So what happens those days? I am in the gym at 5 a.m. So it's, it's very motivating. There are a lot of ways you can play around with this kind of a technique. And it's really very fun. I've been doing this for years.
What are some of the ways you do leadership, Brad? And I also want to bring in a young leader and everything, who I just met through the pleasure of Brian Schulman and a thing that he does and everything. And she's actually here in North Carolina. But definitely tell folks a little bit about yourself, Kamashki, and everything, because I know that I met through Brad, and you are a young leader, and you're here in Morrisville. So we've got all of the United States covered. I'm in Durham. You're in Morrisville. We've got Brad in New Orleans, and Sandy is out in the West Coast right now. So tell folks a little bit about what you are trying to get done as you are trying to become a young leader yourself. Yes.
Hey, thanks for the introduction. Well, I'm Kamakshi. It's nice to meet Sandy and Brad. Probably don't have much experience as you guys are not the best at, or not the best or better than you guys, but I'm trying to start a nonprofit this year, and I've been working with a group, and I'm planning on starting my own educational nonprofit, so I'm excited. And it's nice to be part of the show.
Good for you.
Tell folks a little bit about the nonprofit, because Brad may have some ideas. He's definitely worked with NASA, and definitely Sandy works at in the courtrooms, but has also worked at newspapers and everything in Mexico. So tell folks a little bit about the nonprofit that you're hoping to start and what the nonprofit will do. Kamashki?
So my nonprofit, can you guys hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
My nonprofit is an educational nonprofit, and where my goal is to put educational resources to everyone, all children around the world, in all ages. So I have an introduction presentation, but I'm still working on it, and I'm excited for it. Our goal is to help as much as that we can to all the individuals in the world that need valid education instead of, just academics. People take education as just math, science, social studies, and everything. But my definition to education is having knowledge and gaining true knowledge. And to do that, I want to start this nonprofit and work on sharing my experience and getting a team together that shares their life in a virtual world so everybody can get inspired and to learn from each
Great.
other.
That's super.
Sounds great. Brad, what kind of advice would you give to somebody, and Sandy, that is trying to start a nonprofit or trying to get involved in leadership at a relatively young age? Like I said, if I remember correctly, she's in her teen years and everything. I want to say like around 18 or something like that, if I'm remembering correctly from the introduction with that I had with Brian Shulman and everything.
The first thing she needs to do is buy my book. The second thing she needs to do is think about, with the mission of the world. That's a pretty big mouthful. You might think about a pilot program in your local area first. That way you can get some feedback on how you're doing from the beneficiaries of your program. Also, with a nonprofit, you have to have a board. And so it's important that you have a board not just made up of friends and relatives, but people that can bring something to the party. Usually it's money. We used to do board training. I worked at a nonprofit here in New Orleans for a short while. And the board members were kind of told either give it or get it or get out. Give it, get it, or get out. That was it. That was the idea. Meaning we're not just watchers here. We need some active members that can really add to the party. So good luck with Yara. That sounds great. We need more and more of those.
And what about you, Sandy? What kind of advice would you give to the young lady as well?
I think that there is something that is called, I don't want to say the name wrong, but I believe that it's something that is called the 8 levels or the 8 stages of philanthropy, which is basically a guideline that shows what can cause somebody to decide to open their pocketbook to a cause. I think it would be very reasonable for Kamashki to take a Google that. I mean, again, I'm not sure if it's levels or stages, but it's like 8 different reasons that might lead somebody to support your project on a financial level, which is, of course, very important. I also think what Brad is saying is very, very valuable, which is to do things on a manageable scale, because sometimes too lofty of a goal can lead to inaction because you can't go about it. It might be better to start smaller and branch out, is what I think. I think Brad hit the nail on the head that way.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that and everything. I do want to get back to more of what Kamashki is doing, but one of the other things I was going to bring up just really quickly, and I'd love to hear from all of you, including Kamashki, is today is International Women's Day, and of course this is Women's History Month and all of that. So I'd love to hear from all of you, including Brad, who are some of the women that have influenced your life and that you look forward to in terms of leadership, and some of the people that you really admire, and they don't have to be famous people. I mean, they can be famous people if that's who resonates with you. But I'd love to hear, they can also be family members. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about that.
Should I start, maybe?
Sure. Yes, you can start while I answer the door.
Thank you. Yes, I think I was brought up in what would these days be considered a 100% feminist household. I don't think that I was aware of that specifically, but I mean, my mom is an architect, her sisters are an economist, a dentist, etc. I mean, it's like a non-issue. I wouldn't say like, oh, that's very impressive. To me, that's the norm. In fact, never in a million years would I have imagined that it might not be the norm, or even that women might be barred from doing certain things. It was something very unsettling to me to even become aware of these things in recent years. I guess I personally have never experienced any form of discrimination based on gender. I seriously doubt that I have. If I have, I really didn't notice. But I do think that there are many, many issues that must be highlighted in these days. For example, in Mexico, there is a very, very big problem with something called femicide, which is basically the murdering of women because of the very fact that they're women. So this is something that has been a tremendously huge problem for a while now. There was a time a few years back when a lot of indigenous, well, not indigenous, but let's say very destitute, very impoverished women in an area called Ciudad Juarez or Juarez in the northern area of Mexico were showing up dead. These were mostly factory workers, orphans, or people without families, etc. And it was never very clear as to who was doing the killing, whether it was ritualistic or satanic, or I mean, the reasons were very unclear, and that was never solved. And in more recent years, there has been a number of other killings, I think, in other areas, and maybe not necessarily destitute women, but maybe, let's say, people of, let's say, lower middle class or I mean, people that might not make headlines. So that is a big, big problem. In fact, last year on March 9th, there was a march, a big protest in Mexico, specifically Mexico City, and other places. But the intention, no, I'm sorry, I'm misstating the date. I believe that happened on the 8th. But on the 9th, a special protest was every woman in Mexico was asked to stay home and not contribute to the economy or to society in any way in order to make society feel what would happen if they were to be killed or to disappear. Of course, that's a very dramatic statement, and it included everything. I mean, that day, of course, you were not to go to work or go to school or shop or go online or do anything that would make you a person that contributes to society or the economy. And I believe it made a statement. However, this whole terrible, terrible issue going on was overshadowed soon enough by COVID. And 2 days later, nobody even remembered this activity. So that was something that, I mean, we cannot let, I mean, COVID, yeah, I mean, it's a terrible thing, no question. But I mean, we cannot let this overarching thing, do away with other issues that are still pending.
Sure.
Definitely. What about yourself, Brad? Now, Kamashi.
Glass ceiling has been broken many times, and it continues to be broken, from our new vice president. In my life, I've seen the change in participants in NASA and private sector companies that go to training are more and more women. Women of color, especially, are getting those opportunities and running with the ball, doing a great job. I think on a personal perspective, my wife, Dr. Susan Weicher, is the migration specialist at the Jesuit Social Research Institute at Loyola University, working with asylum seekers and immigrants. I think that to me is such a big issue today. It's mostly women and children that we're talking about as being, in peril given the situation. And so my wife, I'm proud of my wife that she deals with that every day.
Gotcha. Kamashki, who are some of the women that make you proud and everything? They can be historical, they can be family members, but who are some of the folks that you are very proud of in terms of it being International Women's Day?
I would say I have two sisters and my mother. And I don't know, most women don't say this, but I am really inspired by myself, which is important for women, because I don't think people take self-confidence or self-importance really as a big thing, but it's important. And for me, I am inspired for what I do. Whatever I do, I try to make sure I'm going in the right path from whatever wrong paths I've done in past or whatever wrong paths my family have gone through. So their experiences have helped me. So, and I'm the youngest in my family, so it just gives me an advantage of seeing 3 siblings going through something wrong, and I could probably fix that when it comes to my situation. So I take inspiration from my family, and I definitely take inspiration from a lot of my colleagues. I'm just a student, but when I mean colleagues, whenever I'm part of an internship or whenever I'm part of a job, in those situations also, a lot of women, I've seen one in specific where she's a mother. I'm not going to say names, but like she's a mother and she's working and she's doing an internship that is not paid and doing all this for the sake of experience, because jobs expect you to have a lot of experience during the first initial stage. So, especially for the recruitment process, they say everybody's equal, but sometimes, they try to usually hire men. I'm not trying to put out some fake stuff, but according to research and what I've seen a lot, there's really still really dominating in, at least career-wise, men. So that's why I take them as inspiration. Currently, I'm involved in 5 clubs as a leader just at school, and I'm part of 2 internships and making my own organization. I don't want to stress myself out, but I try to manage my personal life, mental life, along with my both career and education. Because career and education are different things, but they really connect together, and I need to balance all this. And the only way I could do that is from the support I get from my mother and my family and all the women out there that are really, pulling it off easily. According to men and according to everyone in the world, it's easy to be a woman, but no, I don't think so. There's a lot of stuff that are other than work that we do. So it's really nice. I'm inspired by myself too, and a lot of individuals.
Now that makes a lot of sense and everything. And actually, as you were saying that, I was thinking about another one of Sandy's bullet points, and I'd love for her to talk about that, because one of the things that she talks about is the fact that it's not vain or superficial to care about your appearance. And I know that even sometimes us guys let that one slip by and everything. So I'd love to hear you talk about that, Sandy, as well as how that is important within the leadership concept as well.
I think it's very relevant. And the thing is that this is a topic that is very rarely discussed. Obviously, as you were saying, it's not normal or common for guys to hang out over a beer and say, hey, I'm concerned about the size of my nose, or that's just not something that happens. And even though stereotypically it might be assumed that women do talk about that, they don't talk about that either. Maybe if they're like super young or teenagers or something, but it's not a normal topic of conversation among anyone, because nobody wants to be thought of as petty or vain or silly or anything like that. And it's a little bit unfortunate, because the reality is that one's appearance does have an impact on one's outcomes in different areas of life. And to say that it has no impact is, I think, a little bit naive. And I think we can all agree that our experiences will be very, very different, even if we're exactly the same person inside, if we look like a punk rocker or a banker or a cheerleader or, somebody that's, like a skater boy. I mean, definitely, even if you're exactly the same person. Now, here's the interesting thing also. Sometimes our outward appearance, here's the thing. Our outward appearance does somehow reflect how we're feeling inside, and the other way around. I think that during this pandemic, a lot of people have been mentioning that, especially at the beginning, that they would get out of bed like super late. They wouldn't even bother showering. They would just stay in their pajamas. And, that is, on the one hand, an outward expression, if not of depression, at least not of feeling great. That's not normal for somebody that's feeling fantastic. And on the other hand, it also causes you to feel even worse. So it ends up being a vicious cycle. So there's that situation. It's not vain to take a shower, shave in the case of a guy, put on some nice clothes, etc., even if it's you yourself at home, because it does have very distinct psychological effects. Then the other thing is that the clothing you select up to a certain point can have mood enhancing or mood altering properties. I mean, not as far as psychotropics, but I mean it does have an impact. For example, something that you wear that is very soft and very soothing materials, very comfortable, will certainly be more relaxing and make you feel more at ease than something that is scratchy or uncomfortable in any way. And certainly dressing the part can be vastly helpful if you're trying to go on a job interview, give a speech in front of a specific audience and such. It does have an impact. And the other thing is that people really do need to come to terms to their appearance in whatever way they can. Certainly, no matter what you look like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter. Some people are going to consider you astonishingly beautiful. Some will consider you hideously horrible, and some people will think of you as very unremarkable. And there is not much that you can do about that because it is based upon individual preferences. It is based on the fashion of the times because some appearance situations do, come into vogue and then just disappear, much like when it comes to fashion. It also depends on culture. So perhaps, I don't know, a Japanese person might see us one way, whereas in general, somebody from Canada might view us in a very different way. So it's a very interesting topic. I think it's the longest chapter in my book because I thought that this is something that is very rarely discussed elsewhere. And I did want to give ideas for people to come to terms with their appearance, feel at peace with their appearance, and learn how to use it to their best advantage. It's interesting because there is such a thing as a halo effect, which is the fact that people do base their impressions on you based on your outward appearance and the first impression, and whatever they see or think spills over to everything else. If you look like a confident leader, even if in the future it ends up that you're not exactly the best, people will still perceive you more generously than had it been the other way around. I think one of the best examples of this was in that debate many years ago between presidential candidates Nixon and JFK. It was, I believe, the first televised presidential debate. Yeah. Interestingly enough, whoever saw it on TV assumed JFK was the absolute winner, whereas people who heard it on the radio said it was Nixon. And the reason is that for whatever reason, that day Nixon was sweating, his shirt was wrinkly, his tie was a mess, and that day specifically JFK was tan or the lighting was great or something was going on that it really altered public perception. And I know it seems very petty perhaps that you can have people's perception of yourself vary so dramatically by just making some minor tune-ups or minor adjustments to your appearance. But if it's a real thing, well, why not use it to your advantage, right?
Sure.
That makes sense. Kameshka, you said you had a question for us?
Yeah, so I have a question for all four of you, or all three of you. Why did I include myself? But other than that, I also wanted to make a point on what Sandy had to say. I totally agree with you, especially with females. It's a really big deal when it comes to appearance. They have to be careful about not being exposed to others, and in some countries, in some places, it's required and it's cultural only if you fully cover yourself. So I think I understand what you had to say about that, and thanks for sharing that. And as of my question, I was going to ask you.
Glad you enjoyed it. Thank you so much, Kamashki.
Yeah. As of my question, you know how people are still, or not people, females are still afraid of going out at nights, very late nights, because of how all over the world, how bad the situations would be. So what do you have to say about that? Safety is a big measure that women have to take care of, even staying up outside.
No, I think safety is very much an important issue, and I think that that's something that a lot of ladies are very concerned about, but also a lot of guys as well. So I know that that's the reason that a number of our areas are doing curfews and things of that nature. But definitely there's a lot of societies that are even more repressive than others without the world and everything. So I do know that that can become very much of an issue of safety. I've got a friend that lives in another country in the Middle East, and they actually live in Jordan, but they oftentimes talk about what they can or can't say based on the fact of where they live at and what they are involved in and all of that. And then I've got another friend who's actually involved in this whole podcasting world. But Mona Shakes oftentimes talks about that on her Mona Rants, and she's actually originally of Pakistani descent and is got even though she's Pakistani American, I think if I remember correctly, she was born in Pakistan. I don't think that she's second generation. I think she's first generation. But I mean, or maybe I'm getting the generations wrong. That if you were born there, then that's first generation, I think, or whatever. But I know that she's here now and everything. But she was talking about how a lot of times that has impacted even her own life and even what she feels comfortable with. She's very outspoken. So right now she's not afraid to say much of anything, but she knows that if she was to go back to Pakistan, she would probably have to curtail it to some degree based on what their rules are.
Yeah, I agree. So, Sam, do you have something?
Yeah.
Oh, Brad, go ahead.
Well, is your question mostly about U.S. cities or?
It's all over the world, but I know, like, especially as of my experience also, I had this experience also throughout my life that, like, we're told by all over the society that there's a lot of rape stuff or other bad stuff that might happen to a girl if they go out after 8 or after 9, especially in India, especially in Pakistan or Asian countries or anywhere around the other countries. There's a lot of countries where people, especially females and female parents, are afraid to send their kids out after 8.
Well, my experience has been that every city I've ever been in around the world has areas that you shouldn't walk in and areas that are okay to walk in. Each one has culturally determined, can you walk as an individual? In India, I work in India, and usually you rarely see a woman walk by herself. Usually it's groups of folks, safety in groups. That's the same in New Orleans as it is in Ranchi, India, where I worked, So, I mean, that is always an issue in New Orleans. We have issues around carjackings and things like that. It happens everywhere. I mean, there are crime cameras put out now in different places. I think it's just part of the world we live in that we have to be careful of that. So, I would tell a granddaughter who's 18 to be careful, Yeah.
I agree with you. Definitely. Sandy, what was your thoughts about what Kamashi was asking? And just to add to what she's saying, I do know that a concern that people have had nationally and even internationally has been the whole concern, because I want to say that Mexico City has been one of those that was impacted, is the whole issue of human trafficking, which is definitely an issue that is of major concern around the world and all of that. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on what Kamashka is asking.
Absolutely. Well, what I think is that ideally, in an ideal world, everybody would be free to wear whatever they felt like wearing and walk wherever they felt like walking, but that's in the ideal world. Even though rape is never the victim's fault, and it's always the rapist's fault, much like theft is never the victim's fault, it's always the criminal's fault. But still, you don't want to put yourself in harm's way in any situation. Fortunately, well, I mean, it's a start. It's not much, but fortunately, I think that in many Western countries these days, the idea of another type of crime, which is date rape, is now very much frowned upon. It's not something that people, if some guy were to do that, he wouldn't be bragging about it or posting it online because he would be like canceled like now. So it's not something that people are doing much anymore. But I have to say that back in the 80s, 90s, etc., I would say that was a normal course of conduct. And even if you look at American movies from the 80s or 90s, ranging from The Revenge of the Nerds through 16 Candles, etc., there is at least one scene that can only qualify as date rape or tricking somebody into sex. which would these days, those scenes would simply not be allowed, especially not in comedy, because they have no place in modern society. And in fact, I would strongly recommend you watch a movie called Promising Young Woman. It's a brand new movie. And although it is not specifically said so, it appears to be that it's set in the 90s. And it's basically about this person that is taking revenge on people that are attempting raping drunk women in bars, which is, I mean, whether that still takes place or not as often as it used to, I think that it is much more frowned upon than it used to be, when people would mostly turn a blind eye or say, oh, that's just the way it is, or why were you drinking, or why were you there, or it's your fault you were in a bar. So at least in that regard, I see progress, definite progress in that regard. But much like Brad and Mark were saying, I mean, regardless, it's best never to put yourself in any situation where you might be at risk. Not because you're a woman, but just that would be my advice to my son, to my friends, to male adults, to everyone. Nobody should put themselves at risk. But I have to say that I myself was a crime victim once, not rape, but crime. I was in a taxi cab many years ago with my date and a female friend, so 3 people. You would assume that's relatively safe. And still 2 men stepped into a taxi cab, one with a gun and one with a knife. And they basically abducted us and kept us with them for quite a while. In fact, it was a very terrifying experience. And that was taking as many precautions as one can potentially take. So, I mean, really, if you have to avoid things to stay safe, definitely avoid them.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I know that is definitely a concern that a lot of folks have. I know I was actually doing 2 business leadership conferences recently, and what shocked me was the amount of women. I think it was like 3 or 4 women, might have been 4 or 5, that had actually been saying that they had been the victims of some sort of abuse, whether it was a date situation or some sort of the more
assaulted,
even more aggressive than that and everything. But they had all been part of that and had, in some cases, had it happen to them multiple times. And oftentimes it was by people that were in positions of power. So sometimes you do have to be careful about those people in positions of power, because that's sometimes the ones that you have to be aware of, but also you have to be aware of people within your own environment, because they do say that a number of times these cases happen with folks that are in their own families and all of that. So a lot of times you have to be concerned about family members as well. I did want to bring up something to Brad and everything, just as we were talking about deep issues and everything, and it's not to get away from commodities, but it's also another one that I am sometimes concerned about as I get older, and I'm 58 now, and definitely, Brad, you just mentioned that you are a grandfather, and I don't know whether that means you're in the 60s, 70s, or 80s, but I was just wondering your thoughts as to how we're doing in terms of ageism, because I do think that that is something else that we don't deal enough with in terms of like even realizing that a lot of times folks that are well into their 70s and 80s, and I would even argue 90s, are still capable of doing work and all of that. But we do sometimes in society want to force them out of work. I think that that's one of the things that some of our other parts of the world do better at. They definitely still have several generations in the same household. And a lot of times they will even have people working well into their 80s, 90s, and I would even argue their hundreds in some cases. But definitely I was wondering if that's something that you've had to deal with, the whole concept of ageism.
It is out there. I feel that I've been involved personally with it, but I could be wrong. You know, you think you compete and then you don't win, you just chalk it up, but you know, who really knows? I think part of the problem, especially with white men, is that we've been in charge for so long that I found this at NASA, that you're on the bench, you know, and you're this quote technical expert, and the young black new team leader gets promoted, and now she is your boss, and you don't like it. You don't like change. You want to be told by this young whippersnapper what to do and where to go and stuff like that. So I think part of it is our own problem, is that we have not older white men have not adopted. This is not everybody. I certainly feel I'm like that. that we haven't changed with the times and have not accepted change as we should. On the other hand, I think there are very qualified people. I'm now in my 70s, and you almost think, hey, now I know what I'm talking about. Now I've got experience, and I've seen, successes, failures. I got a lot to add and bring to the party, but you're not considered because I'm more expensive now than I used to be. I'm not as available as I used to be. I'm less willing to travel like I used to be, and so it's a little bit different situation, even though you think you're bringing a lot to the party. So it's actually funny that this COVID, actually, I think it's helped in many respects because we're now operating. I mean, I've done workshops on temperament out of my home, so that actually has kind of helped versus going to a place every day and like I used to do. So
no, I would even argue that it's helped in another way as well, because one of the things that I admire, while there are several parts of the Indian and the Pakistani and even some of the African countries, cultures that I may not admire, one of the things that I do admire is the fact of their unity in family, meaning that a lot of times, like I mentioned before, there might be 3 or 4 generations that are living together and all of that, whereas we were oftentimes, and I would say that across the board, whether it was African American, whether it was Latin American, whether it was white American or whatever, we were oftentimes spreading ourselves out. One family member may live in Colorado, another one may live in Florida, and another one may live in North Carolina, while somebody else lives in New York. So you didn't see your family as much as you did in the past, whereas as you just mentioned, with Zoom technology and with a lot of folks staying at home, I think that we are becoming more of a kind of like coalesced family unit, even in the ways that we're communicating with our family members. And I hope that it stays that way in terms of after the pandemic is solved, that we use these technologies and stuff in order to stay in touch with our family. Because I do see that I'm seeing more of that happening on a regular basis, where people are having Zoom calls or family reunions and things of that nature that is more similar to what some of the other cultures are, like Latin America, like Asian Americans and others that are always oftentimes in those tight home environments. But I'm hoping that that's something that will be.
Yeah, I agree. There's much more respect for the elderly than overseas, other foreign countries, than I'm finding in the States. That's too bad, but I think it's true. It's very true.
What about yourself, Sandy? What is your thoughts about the way that family structures are and things of that nature? I know a lot of times there's this stereotype of the Latin American family with like 3 generations together, oftentimes in that crowded house, but in order to save money, they do that on a regular basis. But I was just wondering your thoughts as one that came from Mexico and now lives in Los Angeles area.
Well, I have to say that, to a certain degree, it's a little bit of an overgeneralization, but I would say that in many, if not most, or even all countries outside of the U.S., multi-generational ties, if not living situations, are the norm. It's only here that, and not so much anymore, but up until, let's say, a couple of generations ago, it was basically 18 and out, which is not by any stretch the norm anywhere else. It's not normal in Asia. It's not normal in Africa. It's not normal across Europe. It's not normal in Latin America or in pretty much anywhere else. Now, I see that here in the States, that's also changing, perhaps because of financial situations, of course, but also I think that people might value the connection a little bit more these days, especially now that people have been so isolated. I find it very heartbreaking when people here say, oh, we're having Thanksgiving dinner and it'll be so awful because my awful uncle and this awful other person and I hate them, and oh, my mom is coming to visit, I can't wait to get rid of her, and then my dad is calling on the phone, oh, what a bore. To me, that is heartbreaking. That is horrible. And that even speaks a little bit to, maybe it's a little bit too strong to say, but I think it might lead to a little bit of self-hatred, because if you think everybody that made me who I am is a loser and a bore, then what does that say about me? Am I not satisfied with the person that I am, that I have such critical and horrible thoughts about my family? So that's something that I think one could think about. But then there's the other thing, specifically to speaking to the topics of family. The important thing is that I think in this day and age, around the world, I don't know, maybe there are more traditional societies, but in Mexico and here, I see that there are just so many family compositions, and it's all right. You might have a family unit that is like the nuclear family. That's great. Or it might be an uncle and a niece. That's also great. Or it might be a grandma and a mom and a son, and that's also fine. Or it might be two dads and three adopted children. Also good. I mean, there are just so many different types of families, blended, not blended, single parents, multi-generational, and every option might be appropriate for an individual situation. If you look to pretty much any children's movie in the last 15 years, I would say that very rarely is a nuclear family the main focus. Normally it's a grandpa and the granddaughter, or 15 siblings and a single parent, or it's just different compositions. And I think that's very important because children need to understand that no matter what their family structure is, it's fine as long as they are loved. It really doesn't matter. Having a nuclear family is certainly not the be-all and end-all. And if anything, it would be very harmful for a child to be in a nuclear family where there's abuse or violence, or just no love in any way. Whereas they might be perfectly taken care of by a single parent, or by grandparents, or by a foster parent, or I mean, you really don't know. Every structure is very, very different. That's something to yeah.
Yeah, definitely. One of the things I was asking, I know, and we're still going to continue the conversation for at least a few more minutes, but Kamashi's got to leave it around another 10 minutes or so, probably has that homework and everything else to do and everything along those lines. But definitely, are there any questions that you've got for Brad or Sandy that you would like to ask them as you are thinking and everything? Because I'm always open to having other folks ask questions as well. So I didn't know if you had any questions. And of course, we would love to know for you to share with them how folks can get in touch with you if they're interested in helping you with the nonprofit, and also the name of the nonprofit.
So the name of the nonprofit we have decided is Universal Vidya. And that basically means universal means there's a lot of definitions to it. My definition to it for this purpose of a nonprofit is worldwide. And Vidya means true knowledge, and it's a Sanskrit word. And I have a presentation and I have some information, and I'm working on the website so I can share all that social media and other stuff with you later on so you can share it with everyone. But that's pretty much it. And as of me having questions for them too, really don't have any questions now, but it's nice to connect with all of you. I would love to reach out to you guys in LinkedIn and talk more, I guess. Great. But for now, I think I've nothing.
Great, thanks.
Sounds great. So definitely always good to have different leaders of different styles and everything from different aspects of society and all of that. One question I was going to ask, and I'll actually start with you, Commissioner, since you've got to leave, is what is some of the things that have surprised you, what are some of the stereotypes that folks have about Asians or folks from India that you would like to have conquered, or that you would like folks not to have about people from your society? And I'm going to ask Sandy the same question about folks from the Mexican standpoint. But what are some of those stereotypes that you feel folks sometimes fall too much into the trap of?
Yeah, I think especially as a student, I relate to this more. One main thing is everyone believes that Asians are smart and Asians are really good in math. Asians are like the top notch in math. You got to hire them when you need a math thing help. And I don't think it's true for everyone. I've seen maybe stereotypes are made based on the majority or most, but like it's really not true. Especially even with me, I'm one of the biggest example when it comes to not being good at math, at least. I don't know if I'm smart, but I know I'm not good at math.
Mm-hmm.
And relating to that stereotype, I don't think people are putting too many expectations around everyone through their stereotypes. And that's one expectation that people give through that stereotype. And people will be expecting me, if they know that I'm an Asian, they'll be like, okay, I'm going to hire you because you're smart. But who knows, maybe you're not smart, you're creative and do have other skills that might not relate to this. But yeah.
Yeah, good point.
Yep. Makes a lot of sense. What about you, Sandy? I know there's oftentimes stereotypes that folks have about folks from Latin America, but particularly those from Mexico, and everything. One being that all Latin Americans are one unified group, and I know that that's one of the biggest stereotypes, because somebody from Mexico is not necessarily going to have the same viewpoints as somebody from, say, Colombia, or somebody from Brazil, or even somebody from Panama, or a number of the other Latin American countries. And I would say the same thing to Kamashka as well, because I do think that sometimes people try to put a lump that all folks are the same, whether that's from India or Pakistan or Cambodia or a number of the other Asian countries, when we know that these are all separate cultures and have separate identities. But a lot of times folks try to make them seem like they're homogenous.
Oh, absolutely. I think you're exactly right in that assessment. For example, Mexico specifically, and I'm going to speak about Mexico because that's the place that I know the best. It's a melting pot. It really is. It's every bit of a melting pot as much as the U.S. So you might find people of different races, different personalities, different types of appearance, vastly different. There are plenty of certainly Spanish immigrants, but there are also, at least in Mexico City, there's a strong Japanese community, a strong German community, there's plenty of people from around the world. And of course, people are, I don't think in this day and age, anybody would be like a 100% native indigenous person from this particular population, because that's just not the nature of the modern world. I think you would need to be like in an extremely secluded country, like far apart from anything else, in order not to have a number of backgrounds yourself. So that's interesting. And sometimes when people picture a person from Mexico, they might picture a very specific type, physical type or personality type, and assume that would be true across the board. But that would be as bizarre as meeting, okay, let's think about two random Americans. For example, the president and Lady Gaga and I don't know, Michael Jordan. Is there any similarity between these people? Let's say that I had only met Michael Jordan. I would assume that everybody in the United States looks exactly like Michael Jordan, and that makes like zero sense. If I only met Joe Biden, I would assume everybody in the States looks like him, and that's also not accurate. Same thing with Lady Gaga, and the same thing is true in Mexico. Because you have met just because you have met a number of people from Mexico does not mean that everybody else is in any way necessarily similar in appearance, personality, interests, etc. Now, interestingly enough, although in Mexico City I have met people from many countries, I very rarely, if ever, met anybody from Central and South America. That's not the norm. Most people are from Europe or from Asia potentially, but not necessarily from Central and South America. Now, I do know people from Central and South America from travels, but not because they lived in Mexico at any point in time. That's something that also people are not aware of. They might assume that there are a lot of people from different countries in the Americas in Mexico. That's not quite the case. Although here in LA, I have met many people, lovely people from Honduras, El Salvador, different places, but not in Mexico. In Mexico, I never met them, or at least not in large numbers. But I do think that there are stereotypes all around. For example, if I ask you to picture a middle-aged, single mom, Hispanic, let's be honest, I think we all can picture someone, right? Well, that would describe me. And maybe I would not be the exact person that would pop into your mind when given that description. So that's the thing. I mean, you really cannot let yourself be guided by stereotypes. And in meeting people, you need to broach each and every one of them as an individual, because that's what we all are.
No, I definitely agree with you. And that's one of the things that I love about where Brad lives at. And I've actually got some friends from New Orleans. And one of the things I love about New Orleans is that it is one of the true melting pots. Even though I've never actually physically visited there, I've got friends that have visited there. And I have definitely got it on my bucket list of places to go to. And definitely I've always felt that it was that true melting pot. And being a big blues fan, I know it is definitely a blues home, and all of that, definitely having a great blues sound. And I know some of Zydeco performers that are there, like Rosie Ledette and some others, Clifton Chenier and a number of others. So definitely I would love you to share a little bit about your thoughts of your home area of New Orleans. That's, like I said, even though I've yet to go there, it's one of my favorite cities, along with Miami, which I have been to.
It's funny because I moved down here from the DC area in 2004, the end of 2003. So I had a great year here before Katrina hit. Right. And then took us away for several years, But I really like it here. The metaphor that you hear mostly now is not so much melting pot where everything gets put into a bowl and you can't tell one from another. It's salad bowl, where you look at a salad. Tomato is still a tomato in that salad. It's like a jazz aficionado is still a jazz aficionado versus a Zydeco versus some Cajun. So you hear that a lot, but it's delightful. So this place has really been hurt by COVID, though. I mean, this is a service industry town. Musicians, performers, hotels, conferences, Jazz Fest was postponed, Mardi Gras was postponed. So a lot of people are hurting here, restaurants, So it's been a very difficult COVID time for us. In fact, the state opens up a little bit more than New Orleans at times, in terms of what's open and what's not. So it's tough times here, but there's a great spirit. For example, in Mardi Gras this year, there were no parades, so no floats. So people were decorating their houses like floats, and we would drive by different neighborhoods to see the quote floats, the house floats, and they think that will be a new tradition now going forward in New Orleans because of that. So that's the creativity and innovation that you see here in New Orleans.
No, New Orleans has always had that great creativity, and definitely I've seen some of the outfits that some of those Mardi Gras groups would put together and everything, and those were just truly amazing the way that they did that and everything. But as a sports fan, and I am a fan of certain sports, including my Marquette Golden Eagles, it was good seeing, they were not doing good this year, even though they did manage to beat Xavier this last game and everything, but it was interesting seeing fans in the auditorium. Now, it wasn't a lot of fans. It was probably like maybe less than 2,000 or something like that, but just seeing a few faces in the auditorium was just truly good to see, and looking forward to seeing more of that. And I actually work with a couple of theaters and all of that, and I know that one of the things that I regretted having happen this year was there was 2 virtual film festivals that usually would have been true life film festivals with folks watching the films and then actually getting to interact. And they did get to interact virtually, but I'm talking about interact face to face with the filmmakers. But because of COVID, we had to go in that virtual mindset and all of that. So definitely hoping that 2022 we'll see more of the live versions, even though more and more people are telling me that it'll be hybrid mixes. I think that even what you're talking about with that new tradition might be an example of that hybrid mix. So we'll be seeing people doing like maybe concerts tied in with a virtual concert as well. So I think that we'll see more and more of that happening in our lives as we deal with this pandemic, which hopefully we're going to get this vaccinations out and all of that. So I don't know whether either of you have had your vaccinations yet. I'm still on the list not to further down. So I have not had mine yet, but both of my parents have, as have several other relatives close to me. But have you managed to get yours yet, Brad? And what about you, Sandy?
Yes, I've had both Pfizer, so I'm very happy. And it's been 3 or 4 weeks since I've done that, so I should be in pretty good shape.
Sounds good.
I had one only. My next one is still a couple of weeks away. No side effects, nothing weird. I mean, I know a lot of people are very concerned, and I mean, I suppose it depends on the individual. But honestly, I had like zero issues so far.
Same with me.
That sounds great, and that's definitely some good positivity to hear. And I know I was talking to somebody, or maybe I was just watching them on one of the TV stations and everything, and they were saying that it felt like just like a prick, and they were one of those folks that didn't usually like to get needles or have any kind of dealings with doctors, but they were actually having that reaction of like, that's all?
Yeah, painless.
So definitely the fact that it's painless is definitely going well and all of that. And I know the other thing that I had talked about that I'm looking forward to, and I was curious to hear whether y'all are looking forward to it as well, is that supposedly as of tomorrow, we'll get a stimulus package passed, and we're all supposed to get checks in our mail or some kind of way or another. So we'll see whether that happens or not. So Sandy, are you looking forward to that stimulus check? And are you like me? Do you need it?
I think everybody is looking forward to that. I mean, I don't think anybody would say, oh, no, not for me. No, everybody wants it.
Same here. What about you, Brad?
Yeah, unlike the vaccines where you get some anti-vaxxers, I don't know of any anti-checkers.
Exactly.
They don't exist.
They don't exist. No. I don't think there's a lot of people that are going around saying, no, you can take that back. No, I don't need that.
Although we have locally seen when the last one came out, the $600 one, I did see some people donating it to food banks and things like that. So there are some good people that will, take that as an opportunity to help others.
Well, that's one of the things that I'm glad you brought that up, because that's one of the things that I think I've seen more of during the COVID pandemic, and definitely I've seen it when there have been other disasters. You mentioned Katrina earlier, and I can even think about even the forest fires out there in the West Coast. But it does seem that whenever there is natural disasters, that's when people seem to be truly at their best in the sense of like trying to have goodwill toward man, to use that kind of cliche and everything along those lines. So I just wondering your thoughts on that, whether you're seeing more and more people that are trying to do good things in society. I mean, you do have some folks that don't necessarily want to wear masks or don't necessarily want to follow the rules. But as a general rule, I think that whenever we have these kind of worldwide disasters, which is what this pandemic is, or even more localized disasters like which Katrina was, and definitely what's going on in Texas and even the forest fires, we are seeing more of the good of people coming out. But I'd love to hear your thoughts about that as well.
Sandy.
Okay, well, I have to agree. I mean, I think we can even see that on a smaller scale within marriages, friendships, relationships of all kinds. It's never, here's the thing, whenever something terrible happens, a tragedy, something awful, people normally bond all the more. However, when things get difficult and prickly, it's because of the little things. What normally a huge, overwhelming problem is actually good for bonding. So it's interesting. And the same thing happens on a larger scale in society as a whole. When something terrible happens, an earthquake, etc., tsunami a few years back, for instance, that was also a very bad thing in Asia. And certainly I do remember Katrina. One of my cousins was studying in Tulane at the time. And obviously the kids had to be relocated to the University of Texas in her case. And that must have been horrible for everybody there on many scales, financially terrible. I mean, people might have had a very rough time. And I do believe, at least from what she tells me, that the community really came together. And that's what tends to happen with big tragedies. Hopefully you don't need to wait for a terrible tragedy to get involved with your community and do your best, though.
Yeah. But same in New Orleans. I think we've had plenty of hurricanes, and Katrina being the worst, but you do see people helping out quite a bit, fund drives and different things like that. So people can be very helpful, I think, and the local sport teams here help out as well, especially the Saints, and So yeah, I'm kind of proud of our city and what they do.
Definitely. I want to come back to your book as well, Brad. And one of the things you talk about is not just, I mean, you talked about the temperaments, and I love the temperaments and all of that. So could you definitely talk about, because don't know that we oftentimes think about the idea of temperaments with teachers and school administrators, but that was one of your articles as well. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how that plays into even the education fields.
Remember, there are four temperaments: earth, air, fire, water. Earth's more
Right.
traditional. Most teachers we found are earths. Think about it. They're telling people what to do, where to stand, raise your hand, a lot of rules, a lot of regulations. Administrators as well, a lot of earths in that. They need to make sure they got the funds, they got the desks, they got everything going. And so my article and what we found, especially the biggest problem in the education for us has been the fire children. You have kids, especially elementary school, who fires are the ones that are kind of wild at times, right? They catch on very quickly, but they like to have fun and they get bored very easily and they don't like being told what to do. Guess what? They're supposed to be raising their hand, staying quiet until called upon. A lot of rules and regulations in that classroom. You got a fired child who gets an assignment, and boom, they get it right away. But guess what? Little Bobby next door to them, he's struggling. But guess what I'm going to do? Because I'm bored, I'm going to go bother Bobby. So the earth teacher says, "Wait a minute. You can't bother Bobby. Go in the corner." And what has happened is that kids we found that are fire temperament kids often are the ones that are get disciplined and get put on Ritalin to quiet them down. They think there's something wrong with them, and so they get drugged as the way of dealing with it, as opposed to being more aware of differences in temperaments.
No, I definitely agree with you on that. So yeah, I can see where that would play into what's going on and all of that, and I can definitely see how that would play into the aspects of what you're talking about. What are some of the things that surprised you about your time in the Peace Corps, Brad? Because you were also in the Peace Corps, so I'd love to know your thoughts about the Peace Corps as a training tool, because a lot of times people think that is like a way that they can even learn about education and even becoming like English teachers and a number of other things. And I know that the Peace Corps is still out there even to this day and has been out there for decades. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about the Peace Corps.
Over 50 years. Well, we don't have too much time to talk about all of that. I was involved with Peace Corps for 10 years. As a volunteer for 3 years, I was on a little island of 150 people. It was 3 miles long and 200 yards wide. It was an atoll in the Marshalls. And so you learn to get along with people. You learn conflict resolution. You learn how they do it. You learn about reciprocity, how if you do something for somebody, they'll come back and do it for you. And there's an expectation of that all the time. In terms of training, I got involved with teacher training. So I got to island hop for 2 years and get off and work with local teachers on an island. The ship would come. Those days it was only had ships. There was no airstrips then. And so the training, I got to learn how to train others was my big takeaway, which influenced my own involvement in the training process and learning how to train others. And of course, with Peace Corps, you learn a technical skill if you don't already. Hopefully, you're bringing one with you. I was an English teacher, and so we got trained in kind of the methodology that they used in that part of the world. But then language training, and so there's a lot of different varieties of language training, and you get involved with that. And then the cross-cultural side is the other aspect of training, and so you learn, what culture is all about and what you need to look out for and expectations and all of that. So it was a very, it really changed my life, I would say, and steered me in this career path that has led to, writing books on leadership and helping others through kind of self-directed training.
And as we wind down, and we do have just a few more minutes to go and everything, that had a couple of things that I was just going to close out with and everything. But one of them is both of you have ties to journalism. And I've actually got a journalism degree from Marquette. And I know that, Brad, you've got a journalism degree. And Sandy, you worked in the field. So I'd love for you to share a little bit of both of your thoughts about the importance of journalism, even in this modern day society, whether it's the more traditional journalism or whether it's the kind of modern day internet journalism that we have going on now and everything. But I'd love to hear both of your thoughts about the importance of journalism to our modern day society.
Sandy.
Well, it's interesting that you should ask. I recently got into a heated debate with somebody that said that in the past, journalism was this paragon of honesty and good news all the time and fabulous things, and that now it was horrible and terrible and bloody and violent. And I have to say that it is and it isn't exactly true. It is true that these days, media, particularly digital media, require what is known as clickbait, which is basically headlines that incite people to click on them. And they need to be very gory or shocking or maybe a soundbite or even downright misleading. But I mean, I can understand why. I mean, you get the only way that you can attract people's attention is by somehow getting them to look at your content. And in the sea of content that people are currently bombarded with, I can see the reason. Of course, I'm not okay when things are intentionally misleading or, but I mean, I do understand the value in a headline that shocks. I do. On the other hand, when people say, but now the news is so terrible and it used to be so beautiful and it was all unicorns and rainbows, I think I beg to differ. I think it's been a long-standing tradition in journalism. There's even a saying that is, if it bleeds, it leads, which basically means that if a story is gory or shocking or it involves a murder or something like that, it's going to make the front page. And I think that's also quite reasonable because, of course, you need to get people to select, you needed to get people to select your newspaper at the newsstand. So I do see the value in shock value. But here's the thing. Also, I believe that as consumers of news, we need to take everything with a grain of salt, knowing that no news outlet or no individual reporter or editor can be 100% subjective because we're all humans. That's one thing. And then the other important thing is that certainly it's not that the world is this horrifying, scary place. There is good news in the world. There is bad news in the world. And why do we see bad news? First, because it's the most compelling for a reader. That's the only reason. Doesn't mean that there's nothing good out there. There's plenty of good things around us, and you just need to look for them.
Yeah, definitely agree with you. That's one of the things that the international broadcast media tries to do is show some of the good news. And we definitely talk about some of the bad news as well, but we try to highlight a lot of the good and positive people like you two. And definitely Kamashka, who was on earlier as well. But definitely that's part of what the mission is the feeling by the founders of this company that there was too much of that negative news and they wanted to highlight some of the positive things going on, but also try to encourage people to do things that they were not getting from the other news outlets and all of that. So that's part of what both Kim Calhoun and Nick Palveda and the rest of their team were doing when they created this outlet. And then they recruited me, and I've been part of it now for not quite a year, but I think in May or something like that will be about a year of being involved with them and everything. But love to hear your thoughts about journalism as well.
Oh boy, it's tough. There used to be the whole issue about can an individual ever be objective? Is that even a possibility? It used to be, we debate that in journalism school. But now there were, in the days when there were only a few stations and we got our news from Walter Cronkite, that was one era. But today with 24-hour news, you obviously they can't go too deep in any one story. And so there's definitely bias. I mean, I've got friends and relatives who only watch one or two stations, and they are definitely impacted. Their beliefs and attitudes are definitely reflect those stations that they watch.
Well,
some of us who try to listen to more than one station, I find myself trying to go to something I don't believe in particularly, and you can only listen so much before your blood begins to boil, of saying, wow, that's not fair, or they didn't get the other side, or they're misinterpreting. So that's a tough racket to be in today. It pays more than 50 years ago, but I'm sure, but it's tough today to be a good journalist. I think I enjoy the most the guys out in the international ones out in the field, and the embedded folks. I think that's the kind of journalism that I kind of like the most.
Oh, yeah, definitely agree with you on that. Sandy, I know you've got to get ready to go, and I'm getting ready to wrap everything up for everybody and everything. But if you could give us your social media outlets, and one of the things that I try to do for everybody, and I'll start with you since you're the first one that's got to depart, is I always like to have my guests give their words of encouragement or their words of positivity that they would like to share with our global audience, because we do have folks that are watching from as far away as Australia and New Zealand, South Africa, and a number of other places, whether they're watching now or whether they're watching in what we like to call team replay and all of that, meaning that they'll go back and watch after the fact and all. But definitely any words of encouragement and ways that folks can get in touch with you.
Thank you so much, Mark. It was such a really, really a treat to speak with you and Brad, and also Hamashi that had to leave, but I mean, it was great. So if anybody out there wants to connect with me on social media, they can do so on Instagram at Choose to Prevail. Or if they care to take a peek at the book for themselves, that's also available. The title of the book is Choose to Prevail by Sandy Rodriguez, and it's available on Amazon worldwide, and also pretty much anywhere else. It's on Barnes & Noble, it's Walmart eBooks, it's the Target.com, pretty much anywhere that you can buy books, also a few independent stores, but I would say Amazon is the safest bet. And as for words of encouragement, well, to be honest, and not to be overly self-promotional, but I would say choose to prevail over whatever circumstances are surrounding you. We can always make a choice to look at things from a different angle. We can make a choice to react to things in a different way. We can even make the choice to change things, to make things different in our surroundings. And I know it's easier said than done, but once you truly believe that you have more agency and control over what is going on, the easier it becomes to actually effect that change. Thank you.
Thank you. Definitely appreciate you. You are a great guest, and hopefully you'll come back. I always try to have guests come back whenever possible. I know Russ Hedge has been back a couple of times, and a couple of other guests have made multiple appearances. So that is to both of you two, as well as Kamashki. So definitely hoping that let you know that y'all are always welcome to come back. I've thoroughly enjoyed the conversation and hope that you will make return trips whenever you are available.
Thank you so much. Nice to meet you both.
You too.
Pleasure.
Marc, you can find my stuff on my website, braddude.com. It links to all the books and all the articles and things like that on my LinkedIn. In fact, I just did 5 articles on my LinkedIn page that summarize one of my books, 40 Tips for Figuring Out Your Boss. And so that's right out there.
And I understand you also have a couple of groups as well, though, because I did go, and I think that you've got them all under like the same names, either Temperament and Leadership Network or Leadership and Temperament channels. So
exactly.
They can find you there as well. They decide to go to those channels also. And I'm sure that you would love to have new members within the group to share their thoughts about temperament and leadership as well.
Yeah, I think it's great because it deals with more than just leadership. It deals with relationships and family and things like that. So that's exactly right.
Cool.
I agree with Sandy that, kind of a takeaway for me on this is that we can choose to change our behavior. Some people say, that's just me, accept me for what I am. Well, you can change. You can be better. You can try out different things, and you can treat people differently. I think a second takeaway for me is that we need to be more aware, and we can be aware of differences in the people that follow us and the people that we work with, whether they be family members or followers at work, or the people that give us our paychecks. So I think that's important that we recognize that the way we view the world influences our behavior, and whether you are drilled by Fox News or MSNBC or whatever the influence is, that will impact how you interact with others. And I think as we become more aware of that, that allows us to develop our temperament a little bit more and develop our personalities so that we can get along better with others. And that's kind of what it's all about.
No, I definitely agree with you on that and everything. I definitely agree that we can be in control of our own temperaments and all of that. So I think that both of y'all are making a great point in that sense. You had actually alluded to it, and we didn't cover the music aspect. I tried to cover something of music within Mullins Music and the memories, and we did share some memories of past things that have happened in our lives. So we covered the memories part, but we didn't cover the music aspect. So I'm going to ask both of you really quickly, if you've got time, what is the favorite music that you enjoy? You kind of gave me a hint when you said that you are a jazz person and everything, Brad. So definitely, I'm just wondering, what is your go-to music and your go-to musician? And the same for Sandy.
Well, I'm a Louis Armstrong fan, and we go to there's a festival every August here in New Orleans. Canceled, well, who knows? This year it may happen, but last year's was canceled. But I'm a big Louis Armstrong fan. My wife has visited his home in New York, which is a museum now, a few times. So yeah, it's jazz and Armstrong for me.
Cool. What about for you, Sandy? What's your go-to music?
Well, I have to say that while I do enjoy things such as classical music or even opera, the reality, and many people find that surprising, is that for me, my favorite music is hard rock music, heavy metal, punk rock. Those are my absolute favorite types of music. And in fact, I was very blessed and very fortunate in that a couple of rock musicians were kind enough to write a specific instrumental rock tune for my book launch. So it's actually inspired by the launch. It's very interesting because the book strives to give people a sense of empowerment and confidence. And even if it's not necessarily your favorite genre, I think you would agree that listening to heart-pounding, exciting rock music can be a confidence booster, definitely, more so than, I don't know, a sad country song. Not that I dislike sad country songs, but I mean, certainly the more upbeat the music, the more confident the listener might feel. So, yeah, in fact, if anybody out there, if any of the listeners would care to send me an email at sandyrs@gmail.com, that's Sandy with a Y, R as in Rose, S as in Sam @gmail.com, I'd be happy to send them a file with that rock music instrumental that was composed for the launch. It's pretty cool. It's exciting.
Yeah, like I said, one thing that I can say that this whole kind of pandemic has made us aware of is a lot of our things that we might not have thought we were good at or interested in, that we have found interest in, and all of that. Because an example of that is I have become recently involved with the Daybreaker crowd and all of that. So they do like those dance parties. They would be them taking over a building at the beginning of the day and then playing old school R&B or old rock or a number of other styles of music. But then in the virtual world, they've been doing it virtually. So I'm the old gentleman that might be sitting there middle-aged gentleman in his late 50s trying to tap a toe here and there with no rhythm whatsoever. But at least I'm trying it every once in a while when they're doing their virtual dance parties and all of that. So I know I've attended probably about 6 or 7 of them. Might sometimes be doing other events and just have the music in the background. But there have been times that I have gotten up and tried the dance steps with them as well, or tried the yoga and mindfulness practices that they also make part of their virtual ritual that they do also. So like I said, I've done that. I never would have put you, Sandy, as somebody that was a Twisted Sister fan or like one of those other kind of like, or Metallica, one of those heavy metal kind of groups, just in general looks and everything. So that would not have been my first guess and everything, but
I mean, like, for instance, I was just remembering the other day, my brother at a certain point in time got interested in concert promotion. So we were living in Mexico City at the time, and he and his partners wanted to bring the Misfits, that's a punk rock band, to Mexico so that they could perform at the Hard Rock Live. And I personally drove the Misfits around in my own personal car, and I was thinking, how bizarre is that? But I mean, yeah, it's something that happened.
And like I said, I have nothing wrong with the music. I actually like all types of music. I've even actually gone and attended a couple of concerts where polka was featured, as well as Italian jigs and all of that, because I have been involved with a number of our local festivals. So I've heard all kinds of great music, including a band called Obanach, which, if I remember correctly, they're like a Scottish Highland band out of originally Scotland, but they had the big drums and all of that. So definitely, I do think that all sorts of music can be very good for the soul, and it doesn't have to be one genre or another. I personally am a big fan of the blues, as folks know my email accounts and things of that nature, since Blues Radio is the primary Gmail one that I use and everything. So definitely a fan of blues. And sometimes folks will have that stereotype that all blues is kind of like all country, that it's all sad. But as a man from New Orleans knows that Zydeco sound, it can oftentimes be very upbeat. It can be very much some dance kind of moves that you can do to certain kinds of the blues songs. So it's not always sad. And it's also, in my mind, oftentimes about life. Because a lot of times it might cover everything from the stereotypical blues song of my I just left my wife and those kind of songs, but then there can also be some very seductive and saucy songs about what can go right in a relationship as well. So it can cover the entire spectrum of life within that blues and all of that. That's what I've observed. So big fan of all styles of music. So I might be sending you an email as well to get that rock CD so that I can hear a little bit of that. And who knows, maybe Brad will send me some clips of some of his favorite Louis Armstrong songs as well, because I am a fan of Louis and all of that. So I'm sure you've got some certain songs that are your favorites.
Mm-hmm. Great. Glad to do it.
So on that note, I'm going to bring up some of the ads of some of our other shows and everything and get ready to wrap things up, because as I think I told both of y'all in our email correspondence, Mondays is the day that I've got a friend named Sri Srinivasan who does a thing called the New York Times Read Along, or as he says, where a bunch of maybe crazy people get together and read the New York paper together on a Sunday night and everything. I would argue that that's Monday nights for me and everything, because I don't do one, not two, but 3 podcasts on every Monday, and I've been doing that now for several weeks. So I do 2 of these streaming ones. I'm getting ready to take a little bit of a water break while the ads are running, and then I'll jump on the phone and do the 3rd one, which is the audio version. So every Monday, I'm crazy enough, except for on maybe a Monday where there's a holiday, and then Dean, my audio partner, will take that day off. But for the most part, I'm generally doing 3 podcasts on a Monday.
That'll keep you busy.
Yeah, that definitely keeps you busy. And then I'll come back on Wednesday and do the online dinner party. So all together, there are 4 that I do here on International Broadcast Media. And then I produce a couple of others as well. But definitely in terms of my own shows, there's the Mullings Music and Memories, the one that y'all have been part of, the radio show, which was earlier today. And then on Wednesday, we have the online dinner party where I actually get to bring mystery guests on. And then Brad and Sandy are looking at me like, what the heck is a mystery guest? Well, it's basically a trivia contest where I get around and look up history things or things about famous folks or history buffs. So among the mystery guests have been, in the past, we've had Annie Oakley, we've had John Dillinger, we've had definitely more famous people like Shakira and stuff like that. So there's a whole quiz of stuff going on as I'm interviewing people. And I usually start that at maybe the hour or the hour and a half mark. And then whoever's watching is supposed to try to guess who those mystery guests are. And then I reveal that at the end of the show. So y'all can play along as well on this coming Wednesday. So keep that in mind. The mystery guest is something else that happens on a regular basis. And then we do the Gamers Den on Thursday, which is not my show. It's my friend Jatovi's show, but that's about the video game industry. And then I produce my friend Zach's 2 shows, one called Funk from the Front Seat, which he does on his own network, and then Funk Music with Zach, which he does on this network. And then last but not least, I do the Coco McMillan show on Thursday, and Win show is another one. So there's several that I produce, and then we do a producers roundtable. So yeah, they've been keeping me busy here on International Broadcast Media, but I enjoy it.
Yeah, great. Good for you.
Well, thank you so much for having us. Thank you so
No
much for
problem.
having
Y'all
us.
were great guests, and I
Thank you.
thoroughly enjoyed having y'all on. As a matter of fact, I think in order to find that commercial, I'm going to change the backdrop and everything. And that way I can find the commercial, because that's the backdrop for my friend Zach's show that he's got going on, which is funk music with Zach and all of that. So as I find some of the commercials for some of our other shows, I will let y'all check out his backdrop. But one of the shows that we do is a group of guys from Colorado who actually do a whole whiteboarding show where they are creating their own comic books, their own movies, their own variety of shows. And what they do is now they have different interviews. Before, it used to be just Dylan and Zach, but now they bring in special guests, and they're actually creating a whole realm of creative content that they're hoping that somebody will buy at some point or another. But here's their ad for their show, which is entitled Talking Upstream. And one of the things we do before I get on out of here is with the airplane, it's kind of our ending thing, is we have one of our organizers in terms of the leadership team. His daughter did this whole commercial about what folks should be doing in terms of, covering their mouth and doing a number of other things. So I think Brad will enjoy this commercial from the lady that we call Ambassador Amashi, which is my friend Ankit's daughter and all of that. But I think you'll enjoy this.
कोरोना वायरस से कैसे बचेंगे? ओके, हैंड होकर और ऐसे अपने खांसी जब आएगी तो ऐसे करेंगे, अच्छू अच्छू। और कोरोना वायरस को धन्यवाद हमारा म्यूजिक सुनने का।
Oh, very cute.
Everybody loves that. They love the Cabbage
cute.
Patch doll and everything that she had involved in that and everything.
Very cute. Very cute.
Cool.
Great.
Well, here's the plane that we used to get on out of here, and then I'll hit the end broadcast after that. But I do appreciate you being on, Brad.
Okay.